Travis Wesley had the most dreadful day conceivable. It's not every day that your loving wife of 23 years informs you she's seeing other men, starting tonight. Travis sat quietly at the kitchen table, holding a glass of monkey shoulder scotch for 10 minutes. He didn't drink any of the amber liquid. He merely sat there, staring forward blankly, not seeing or hearing anything but feeling a terrible anguish inside him. Travis knew that no amount of Alka-Seltzer would soothe the aching in his gut. He'd heard stories of other men's wives going out with other men, but he discounted them as urban legends. How could a woman expect her loyal husband to accept her dating someone else? Other men? He did not understand how a woman could be so heartless to her own spouse. She has such clearly selfish desires. This happened on Monday. Nonetheless, Travis had a great day at work. He left at 5 in good spirits, whistling as he entered the house. He found his wife sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of red wine and his favorite whiskey. Taking his normal position, he placed down his briefcase, poured 3 fingers of the liquid, and sat in his chair. "What is on your mind, Lauren?" Travis asked, observing the wicked grin on her face. She met his gaze firmly. Her grin seemed slightly wicked. What he saw in her eyes was not promising. He shuffled uncomfortably in his seat. "Do you think I have been a good wife and mother all these years, Travis?" she asked, completely composed. Travis furrowed his brow, conscious of his analytical inclination. She could practically see the wheels working in his head as he responded, "Yes, I believe so. And do you believe I deserve some sort of appreciation for it?" She maintained the same indifferent tone. Travis took a few more time to properly consider the question. "So, should I expect a reward for fulfilling my responsibilities as a husband and father?" "Why are you asking me this, Lauren?" he snapped angrily. "Travis, today I'd like to go on a date with another man," she said gently. Travis was as calm as a lake on a beautiful morning, and he was pleased to be sitting. He felt a rush of bile up his throat. His mind was like an erased blackboard, completely blank as he tried to grasp her desire to go on a date with another man. Lauren gave her spouse an expression that made him feel like a silly child. She nodded slowly. "Yes. Travis is with another man. It has been 24 years since you and I were exclusive, and I have not dated anyone else since then. I've been a faithful wife and mother to our children, and I think I deserve a night out with someone else, just an opportunity to try something fresh. Not wanting love, but rather pleasure. Just love. Making," she explained. "I'm 47 and I won't be attractive indefinitely. I want to look into other possibilities while I'm still appealing and have them at my disposal." Travis's jaw gradually fell in shock. He knew he'd heard his wife correctly, but she couldn't possibly be serious, right? He did not even need to ask the question. Laura nodded at him as if she could read his mind. "Damn," he mumbled as she rose from the table and walked up the stairs to change clothes. Lauren descended seconds later, looking gorgeous in a little black dress that caressed her curves. It had a daring cutout that exposed part of her chest without a bra, and it was just mid-thigh in length. Her makeup was modest. A gorgeous woman need little ornamentation. Her beautiful blonde hair was put up into a high ponytail. It was a spectacular sight. Lauren observed that her hubby was thoroughly engrossed in her. Travis sprang from his seat and declared, "I won't allow this, Lauren. I'm not sure what you're thinking or doing, but you won't do this while still being my wife." Lauren's bright smile turned into a sour grin. "Trav, you will not spoil my evening. You can act harsh, but deep down you know you're not going to divorce me over this. Where else would you find a woman like me? You know it is true. And the kids will be mad at you for ripping our family apart. Toughen up, Travis. Allow me to enjoy myself for a time, and then it will be just you and me again, growing older together. Travis, you love me. You do not want to be alone. While I have several possibilities." A car horn sounded outside. Lauren took a little bag and stepped towards Travis, hoping to kiss him farewell. He recoiled, as if shocked by an electric current. Lauren stepped away, looking astonished and upset. Her expression tightened into wrath. "I will be back." She mentioned leaving. He looked in dread as she left through the door. Could his 23-year marriage truly be ending? That was what it seemed like. He pondered. Lauren didn't even look back at him as she left. Researchers have verified a sad but indisputable truth. Individuals with attractive appearance frequently have an advantage in life over their more typical peers. They quickly make friends, draw more attention, and even obtain higher grades from teachers. In Lauren's case, this was true, and it only became more apparent when she turned 13 and completely expanded her bosom. She rapidly realized that a flutter of her eyelashes and a smile could entice practically any boy she desired. And for the boys who played hard to get, she simply accentuated her physical characteristics a bit more, closing the deal. Travis, like practically every other boy she met, was instantly drawn to Lauren. His family migrated to the city shortly before he began 8th school. When he met Lauren on his first day of school, he was immediately drawn to her. Travis, a great athlete who was popular among his peers, eventually mustered the guts to ask Lauren out on a high school date, which she accepted. They began dating and stayed together until the first few weeks of their junior year at the local high school. Lauren ended things with the young man she was pursuing. Landon Estes, Jr., is a starter on the school's football team. Travis was 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 110 pounds at the time, whereas Estes was 6 feet 2 inches tall and 190 pounds. Travis acknowledged the issue despite his feelings of hurt. He recognized Lauren's superior beauty. Lauren was romantically linked with a football player, therefore most of the lads at school couldn't compete with her in that area. She mingled with the popular students in school, but Travis remained one of the many faceless figures roaming the halls. He dated and befriended a few chosen students, but had no contact with Lauren during his school years. He noted that on the rare occasions that they met paths, she treated him as if he were a complete stranger. Travis was initially outraged by this, but gradually accepted it. By his senior year, Travis had grown 2 inches taller and gained 40 pounds. He was an attractive and athletic young man, but he didn't compare to Lauren. However, very few did. He went to prom with his lovely but not extraordinary girlfriend. That night, they both lost their purity for each other. Lauren was crowned prom queen, while her date was chosen prom king. They also made love after graduation. However, before this, she was not a maiden. She sometimes maneuvered situations to her advantage. Lovemaking was always an option for any guy lucky enough to date Lauren. Travis studied accounting at Michigan State University after graduating from high school. He spent 4 years there. He dated a few girls but did not have any significant partnerships. Meanwhile, Lauren attended Central Michigan University and studied marketing. During her undergraduate years, she dated and slept with a variety of guys, even collaborating with a marketing professor to upgrade a B to an A after years of being desired. Lauren had gotten really skilled at the game. They both found work in Grand Rapids over a year after graduating from college, entirely by chance. Travis and a few co-workers were relaxing on a Friday night at a renowned bar and restaurant. Lauren entered with 2 buddies. All eyes were drawn to the stunning woman in the short green dress with a plunging neckline. Lauren barely recognized the attention. By that point, it had become usual for her. "Who is that goddess?" Steve White exclaimed to the full table of co-workers without pausing. Travis instantly replied, "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Lauren Soames, goddess and my middle school sweetheart." Everyone at the table turned to look at Travis, many of whom were surprised. "Do you know her?" one incredulously inquired. Travis winced, disliking the attention attracted to himself. "We were approximately 14. He mumbled quietly, "I became invisible once high school started, and she ignored me for the entire 4 years. So, have you got any juicy stories from back then?" One of the women at the table joked, which elicited laughs from the gathering. Lauren and her pals took notice for a time. She thought she recognized one of the men at the table, but she wasn't sure. The trio grabbed a seat nearby, Lauren facing the somewhat familiar man's table. "Dude, why don't you go over and say hello?" White suggested. "You're practically drooling, Steve," quipped another colleague, Casey Gardella. "She pretended she didn't know me for 4 years. I'm not sure why she'd remember me now," Travis murmured, nodding in agreement with numerous others. Lauren observed the man while eating her meal. Then she snapped her fingers and pointed to him. Lauren told one of her pals that pointing at someone in a restaurant could lead to difficulties in some situations. She paid no attention to her friend's comment. "I'll be back quickly," she announced. "I need to greet an old friend." Lauren virtually got out of her chair and walked over to Travis's table. "Trav, hi, so glad to see you," Lauren exclaimed as she neared him. Travis rolled his eyes at his companions before turning to approach a former classmate with an awkward smile. "Lauren, it's good to see you." Travis reacted nearly without emotion. Lauren rose from his seat, closed the gap between them, and gently kissed Travis on the lips before placing her hands on his shoulders. Their coworker was in astonishment. Travis was also taken aback. Lauren saw and gave him a smile that was not quite innocent. She felt comfortable playing this game, knowing he couldn't reciprocate. "Let's return to our table. I'll introduce you to my pals," she offered, taking his hand and nearly tugging him along. He spent the majority of the evening with Lauren and her two companions before departing. Lauren got his phone editor number and saved it for herself. Lauren was intrigued by Travis's seeming indifference to her. It was a new experience for her. He was nice in the restaurant, but he gave her and her companions equal attention throughout the evening. She kissed him multiple times, but he never reciprocated. Travis's co-workers at the bar questioned him about his interaction with the attractive woman on Monday morning, and they were surprised to learn that he barely stayed at the pub for an hour before leaving. "She's impressive, but she's at least 14 ranks above me." "I understand," he mumbled. "I don't need that much drama." Travis experienced a similar anxiety in the parking lot of his employment 2 days later, as he departed. He murmured to himself when he saw her waiting by the car. He reluctantly admitted that, despite being dressed in a size too small, she exuded obvious attractiveness. "Why haven't you called Travis?" She spoke softly as he approached. Travis suppressed the impulse to expand his eyes as he studied Lauren's form like a hungry man catching his first glimpse of food in weeks. Her low-cut shirt was unbuttoned down to her cleavage, and the hem was only about 5 centimeters below her waist. "Damn," he mumbled under his breath as she leaned in to wrap her arms around his neck and kiss him on the lips. He felt powerless as she pressed against him. His hand reflexively slipped around her waist, caressing her underwear-clad behind as her dress rose up. Her tongue glided into his mouth like a snake, and leaving his bag, he gripped her other behind, kissing her indefinitely. After what felt like minutes, they parted ways, and Lauren altered her clothing to conceal her underwear. Several co-workers, astonished, hastily drove away in their automobiles. They ate at a restaurant outside the city center, enjoying their meal, but Lauren frequently tugged on her clothing. Both Travis and the young waitress seemed amused by her efforts. Travis was wary of Lauren, but in the presence of a gorgeously clad goddess, he was powerless. His greatest hope was to do well in bed that night. "Oh my God," Travis whispered to himself as he saw Lauren nude for the first time. This woman was the goddess Travis had always imagined. If this was his sole opportunity to give it his best, he had to make sure that lust did not overpower his feelings. Sated. They lay facing each other, gaze locked. Lauren grinned. Lascivious. "Lee," she muttered, "I made a huge mistake years ago. You are fantastic. Who knew? If only I had realized. We have squandered so many years." Travis. Lauren did, however, sense potential when she saw it. Travis did not care about his appearance. He was beautiful, fit, and appeared to be headed for success. He also excelled in bed. "I believed she was talking to herself," Travis admitted, despite Travis's reservations, which mostly concern her self-esteem. Their connection thrived while her physical beauty was visible. He gradually fell for Lauren as she genuinely was. Travis stated, "I bought an engagement ring, but before proposing, we sat down to discuss our views on fidelity. What happened in the past is still there. The same is true for me, but I need to be clear about my future plans. I want full exclusivity between us. No exclusions. If you have any doubts about your capacity to commit to this for us, please let me know right away." He put a little black box on the table between them. Lauren locked eyes with Travis before glancing at the box. "I'll never betray my hubby, never," she announced as Travis unwrapped the box. Travis remembered her words. Despite the advanced warning, his wife seemed to have overlooked this betrayal. He knew it wasn't the case. She hoped he'd perceive it that way, because otherwise, he wasn't genuinely embracing it. Travis knew Lauren had numerous opportunities to stray over the years, but as far as he knew, she had turned them all down, like a loving wife should. She was a perfect 10, number 12. While he rated himself a 6 at best, there was plenty of room for someone more physically suited to attract your attention. Assuming she did not have an affair that I am unaware of, she has been a genuine wife for 23 years. Travis pondered. He should have felt grateful for those years, but he didn't. When he said, "I love you," he meant forever. Not just a mere 23 years. In fact, Lauren received proposals every week, and they were not all from guys. Travis said that she felt she was more than just gorgeous. She was special, a rare goddess among the simply lovely. When God created his wife, he had a wonderful day. Travis was always joking. Lauren first informed Travis anytime she received unwanted attention, with the goal of maintaining complete transparency. However, after a few years, Travis told her that he trusted her enough not to reveal anything. He simply wanted to know whether the unwanted advances continued after her initial refusal, so he could act if required. Women avoided Travis, in part because he wore his wedding ring as a shield. Travis would passionately describe his wife and children within minutes of meeting a woman, essentially putting an end to any prospective interest. Unbeknownst to him, this behavior frequently discouraged possible flirtations. Lauren remained blind to how her husband's actions have thwarted attempts, or worse. Their almost fairy-tale marriage lasted 22 years until Rosa Esposito joined their professional lives, working at the same public relations agency that Lauren characterized as sounding like a Bob Seger song. Rosa, charmed by her black hair, wide brown eyes, and ample breast, attracts men like a magnet. Despite her superior problem-solving abilities, she remained a faithful aide to Lauren, who was regarded as the most romantic lady around. Rose, 42, had been married for 15 years but expressed dissatisfaction with the marriage. She readily told stories of her adulterous exploits, drawing vivid visions of intense meetings with different people. "So you've never strayed since you got married." Rose observed during a coffee break at work, "You appear to be a rock-solid woman, but I find it difficult to believe you don't crave something more." Lauren said, "Well, I am not saying I am not curious, but I would never betray Travis." In recent months, she has witnessed a drop in men's interest at pubs and restaurants, with younger women frequently obtaining the looks she once commanded, raising worries about her appeal. "Let's play the what-if game. What if your husband gave you permission?" "Then what?" Rose inquired. Lauren's look indicated that she had never considered such a scenario before. Thoughts raced through her thoughts. Lauren said with a wicked grin, "I suppose if I had his blessing, everything would change." "Ever considered asking for it?" Rose recommended. "They believe that anything worth having is worth asking for." Lauren had never considered this idea previously. Her expression flared with curiosity before deepening with uncertainty. "He will never grant me permission." "Never," Lauren asserted. "Should I handle everything for you?" asked Rose. Implicit consent. "Tell him. Then take everything you want. Regardless of his response, convince him that he loves you enough to let it, and that you can get through this together. Love is not the issue. You only love him." Travis awoke with the sound of a car approaching the house, realizing it was after 3 a.m. As Lauren entered, he remarked to her about the half-empty bottle of Woodford Reserve. "Great night." He examined the caricature of his wife, who had untidy hair, little makeup, and rumpled clothing. She seemed more smug than sorry. "I could say the same to you," she responded. "You didn't have to wait around. You know I'm going to bed. And you may, but never again with you," he shot back. Lauren gave him a disdainful glance before ascending the steps. Travis drank more bourbon and resumed watching ESPN. He spent the night in his recliner, stomach grumbling. By 9 o'clock, he had prepared breakfast. While eating, he heard the shower in the master bathroom. Lauren would usually descend in a robe, her hair bundled. Today, she appeared immaculately dressed and done up. "Did you leave me something to eat?" she asked. "I made coffee, but you are welcome to cook for yourselves. And now that you're clothed at home, it's time to discuss," he stated forcefully. Lauren was taken aback by Travis's stoicism. She anticipated him to rage irrationally. Easier to manipulate. Travis made communication more difficult, she realized. "Don't you want to know what happened last night?" she inquired softly. Travis detected her sense of superiority. Did she really think he wanted to hear about being betrayed? Hardly. Travis responded calmly. "I'd like to know your vision for our marriage moving forward." As I indicated yesterday, I intend to investigate other males for several years. It's just lovemaking. No love, I only adore you. But I want to experience the pleasure of something new. You're great in bed, but I crave diversity. I want to experience other men while I'm still attractive. I've spent 23 years with you with no sense of betrayal. I seek the exhilaration of the unknown. You are fantastic, but I'm craving some variety for a spell. Then we will ride into the sunset together, and I'll be grateful for the opportunity to spoil you exclusively for the rest of our lives, Lauren explained. Travis listened closely as Lauren spoke, making toast and jam for his coffee. He found her way of buttering toast while discussing his life's most important issues rather distant. He had several inquiries. Is it all about finding variety? Am I insufficient for you? He queried in a strained tone. Before she could react, he spoke. So you offer an open marriage for a period before returning to monogamy later. Does this mean I can see other people? Lauren strained to control her laughter. The idea of her gentle, quiet husband asking another woman out was simply funny. Travis was the most committed to marriage of any man she knew. However, if this was all it needed to get him to potentially agree, she said yes. Naturally, I anticipated it to be completely physical for you as well. Travis lifted his eyebrows and shrugged. Lauren didn't fully understand the meaning of this act, but she had an inkling. Would you like to go out with Rose? She's a pleasant woman from my office. I'm sure she'd be thrilled. Lauren proposed, knowing her buddy would be prepared to assist her in her objective of remaining married while pursuing other carnal partners. Travis seemed bewildered. The eager 21-year-old bachelor and him both wanted Rose, but the 47-year-old married man knew he couldn't indulge. I would be delighted to go out with Rose, but no, honey, thank you. That makes me as much of a cheater as you were last night, he declared. Lauren's smile quickly turned into an angry frown. I am not a cheater, she exclaimed. Well, if you say so, honey, he responded far more seriously than she expected. But I still do not agree with this. You'll come around, honey, because I'm doing it anyway, she replied. Rose walked into Lauren's office on Monday morning at 11 a.m. and observed her displeasure. To hell with that narrow-minded moron, Lauren said, closing the door behind Rose. Darn it, he even declined a date with you. Rose frowned. I hadn't realized I was on the table, but forget it. How could he resist this? She remarked, indicating at her body. How was your date? Did you have fun or did Travis ruin it? Rose inquired. A date was incredible. Jonas really knows how to pleasure a woman. Lauren gushed. God, I haven't been with another man in ages. I really loved the difference. Who should I try next? They both busted out laughing. Lauren found relief in the absence of immediate divorce papers and little interaction between them. She decided not to question about Travis's intentions. Travis, unbeknownst to his wife, had no desire to divorce right away. He hoped she'd come to her senses and abandon her silly intentions for infidelity. He believed that if she stopped her irresponsible behavior, she would be able to forgive herself and move on from her mistake. Lauren missed a date the next week, which fueled his hope. Despite their ongoing bedroom separation and difficult communication, he sensed a ray of optimism. Lauren was, however, nicely dressed the next Friday evening as if she were going on a date. Are you genuinely considering doing this again with the same guy, or are you looking at someone else this week? Travis inquired aggressively. Damn, Travis, did you miss anything I said? This is not about you. It's about fulfilling my goals before I lose my allure. I don't desire you any less. I simply crave more diversity. Do you get it? I am continuously sought and I only want to indulge, but I'll always get back to you, she explained. What if I don't want you to return? I will not share you. I will not stand by while you have fun. This is not who I am. I will not wait while you test half of the men in town. One date. Perhaps I could stomach it twice. It's completely disrespectful. Betrayal. Spending the entire night out partying. We've finished. That is not my purpose on this earth, he stated. Wah, 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 she mimicked, wriggling her fingers. You do not want to lose me. It does not need to be all or nothing. Travis directed his lawyer to prepare all essential documents last week, thinking they would not be needed. He planned to call his wife Monday morning, but first he needed to inform his daughters, whom he called that evening. Neither Jackie, 21, nor Michelle, 19, appeared astonished, but after conversing with both, he discovered Jackie might have had a clue. So you knew she was heading for a tragedy and didn't inform me, he yelled over the phone. You don't think I should know what was going on? Please, Daddy. I was in a bad situation. In either case, one of you would have been unhappy with me. Also, it's her body. It is not yours to control. And if she wishes to share it, stop. Don't continue, Travis interjected. I understand that she has put you in a difficult situation, but don't tell me she can do anything she wants with her body since it belongs to her. Dolly's vows prohibited talk of her body. I understand, but he began before she interjected. Damn, Daddy, I apologize, Daddy, she said, when Lauren arrived at 2 in the morning. Travis was not present, despite the fact that it was 1 hour before her last outing. She appeared a little more disheveled. Gabriel Esposito was a big, strong man, maybe the strongest bed partner she'd ever had. By the end of the night, she could barely move, expecting a few bruises from his grip by the next day. Overall, it was an excellent night. She figured she could meet Gabriel again sometime. Lauren was astonished and ashamed when she received divorce papers at her office on Monday morning. She burst into tears and dashed to the ladies' room, where Rose discovered her shortly after. You should have expected him to serve you, Rose said. He's attempting to harm you back. Men can be so foolish seeking retribution, then allow him a week to stew alone. He'll crawl back. Lauren gathered herself, returned to her desk, grabbed her phone, and promptly dialed her husband's number. How could you do this to me in front of the entire office? I understand you're hurting, but Travis, I deserve better. She virtually shrieked into the telephone. After 23 years, don't I deserve more than you opting to open our marriage if I'm not right for you? Couldn't you have told me so we could part ways like adults? I do not desire civility. I do not want a divorce. I still love you, she sobbed. I still love you. But whenever you sleep with someone else, that love evaporates. He let out a growl. My love is not limitless like yours. I've always believed that. Perhaps we were both mistaken. Lauren pursued divorce over Travis's objections. Her lawyer arranged for marriage counseling, but Travis refused to participate when they approached the consultant's office. They were astonished to discover Lillian Carmack awaiting marriage data. According to the counselor, most people want to reunite divorcing couples, typically with a predisposition toward women. The consultant started. Let's start with the basics, Mrs. Wesley. Did you tell your husband about your intention to date other men for a few years? Travis attempted to conceal his smirk. Lauren fought to hide her shock. Yes, I did, she said gently. That is what I desire. I do not need him to do it for me. Our marriage will be unaffected. We'll end here, the consultant announced. Sorry for the inconvenience, Mrs. Wesley. I will notify the judge and put an end to this charade. But, Lauren stuttered. Honey, if you thought what you did to your spouse would work with me, you're mistaken. You should feel embarrassed of yourself. But you clearly have no shame, Miss Camacho remarked. You disgust me. Lauren contacted Travis several times every day for the next month while he moved into a little apartment nearby. He ignored her calls and texts. She eventually enlisted the support of their daughter, prompting them to refer to him as Dad. Do you still love her? If she stopped seeing other men, would you reconsider? Michelle inquired in one of these conversations. She kept adding, even after I filed. Travis inquired, his voice quivering. Silence followed, which confirmed his suspicions. Michelle did not call him again or encourage him to reconcile. Travis was surprised by how quickly news of his planned divorce circulated, particularly among unmarried women at work. Several ladies, including mutual friends, expressed sympathy for his marital troubles. Travis was not naive. He acknowledged that not all of their condolences were truly empathetic. Connie Mayong, a longtime friend of his wife's, called to express her sorrow and almost directly offered him emotional assistance. Travis was taken aback by her unabashed flirtation, given that she had previously exhibited little interest in him. Throughout their acquaintance, I would not seek my friend's husband. That's simply wrong, she assured him. But now that you're single, everything has changed. I am interested in you. Surprised, I'm flattered, but I'm still not officially single. Connie, we will not begin anything till after the divorce. I may be old-fashioned, but I refuse to cheat. Travis insisted. Travis, you are such a Boy Scout. That is one of the qualities I admire about you. Can you at least set me up on a date when you're free? Connie desired. Of course, Travis agreed. But I do not want to jeopardize your friendship with Lauren. You have been pals for many years. I appreciate your consideration, but I should not pass up an opportunity simply because it is unorthodox. Connie responded, "Maybe I'll call you once I'm off the leash." Travis made a joke. Connie, an attractive Asian woman at 5 feet tall with a toned physique and waist-length black hair, was obviously intriguing to Travis, who was surprised she was interested in him. Travis kept his word and contacted Connie on the day his divorce was finalized. They went out to supper and to a local jazz club on Saturday night. Connie observed Travis's uneasiness and commented on it. "I feel like a clueless teenager," he admitted. "It's been more than 26 years since I went on a date with someone other than Lauren." "Are you telling me that the contraception in your wallet is the same one you used on your previous date before Lauren?" she teased. "Should I have bought one? Damn." "I didn't think about it." Travis said, "I am definitely out of practice." At the conclusion of the night, Connie softly kissed him, leaving them both satisfied. Travis agreed to call again. Removing his wedding ring on the day his divorce was finalized did not seem significant to Travis, but it appeared to be a huge deal to single women. Several female co-workers noted the absence of his ring and commented on it, resulting in a spike in flirtation in the office. This was new territory for Travis, and one day around lunch, he told his best friend at work about the unexpected attention. "Wow, there are so many beautiful women in this office. How had I not noticed this before?" Travis exclaimed. "You, my friend, were the epitome of a henpecked man," Robert Ardo observed. "You were so in love with her that you didn't find other women attractive. Sure, she's attractive, but you let her to control you, which could have been part of the problem. She's constantly pushing boundaries. There is value in that. And you were so conditioned, giving off such a vibe, that not a single woman even looked your way." Travis embarked on 4 dates with Connie during the first month after his divorce, despite the fact that he had not yet slept with any of them. That was not his intention. By the second month, demand was still high, and Travis ended up sleeping with 2 ladies. His kids, who had recently been in closer contact with their mother than with him, had often heard her state that while she could easily attract any guy, their father struggled to obtain companionship, let alone a steady girlfriend who felt sorry for him. They paid him a surprise visit on Saturday morning, around 2 months after his divorce. Travis was not thrilled to be awakened at 8:36 a.m., and especially after entertaining his friend late the night before. Sonia, a stunning 25-year-old, was a friend's daughter looking for a dependable escort for her wedding day. The evening went so well that they decided to continue it at Travis's apartment, right as Sonia fell asleep on his bed. Travis, dressed in a robe, opened the door to discover his daughter smiling with bags of breakfast delicacies. "What's happening?" he inquired, astonished as they entered. "Hello, Dad. Can your 2 favorite daughters join you for breakfast?" Jackie chirped as they unpacked their baggage after exchanging cheek kisses. Travis brought them to the kitchen table. They were halfway through the bagels when Sonia returned from the bedroom wearing one of Travis's shirts, slightly unbuttoned, and most likely nothing else. "Sorry, darling, I didn't realize we had guests," Sonia remarked. Mom said, "You call the shots." Both girls flushed as Sonia poured her coffee. "No, Sonia, these are my daughters, Jackie and Michelle," Travis clarified, pointing at each. "We were eating breakfast bagels with salmon." Sonia giggled, forcing her large, braless bosom to shake. She touched Travis's arm and sank into a chair next to him. The 4 had a pleasant talk until Jackie brought up Travis's recent meetings with Lauren. His mood shifted and he felt bothered for the first time in days. He thought it was practically difficult to be sad around Sonia, despite her being a little too much for his 48-year-old self. "I have to admit, Dad, we thought you might be missing Mom already," Michelle said. "We know she misses you, but we expected her to be enjoying her best life after you left. I know I was her anchor, however. She has been entertaining them 2 at a time in our old bed." "Dad!" Jackie exclaimed. Sonia giggled, and Michelle grimaced. "She isn't promiscuous, you know. Seriously. Think about this for a second. How many different males has she slept with since we broke up, including the 2 I knew about before I left?" Both girls flushed and shifted their attention downward. "Wow, what if it's 2 guys per month for 10 months? That's 20 different guys with 3 guys each month, 30 for me." "That's a lot of guys," Sonia commented. If appearances could kill, Travis's daughters would have killed Sonia in 1 instant. She was very aware of this. Don't blame me if a woman can't keep her legs shut, Sonia joked. Children, let us not destroy my wonderful weekend. Travis intervened. Sorry, all three young women whispered together. So are you two an item? Jackie asked Sonia quietly. You don't look that much older than me, your father said. We are the same age. But do not worry. I will never be your stepmother. We are just pals. He's a fantastic person. He was my date at the wedding reception last night, and he's rather attractive. Did I mention that he's a lovely guy? Okay, we can agree. He's a great guy, though we know he can be a bit of an idiot at times, Jackie said. And yes, he is attractive for someone of your father's age. It was Sonia's turn to blush. Travis reddened too. Hey, darling, remember that we have lunch with the married families at the hotel at noon. Sonia reminded me that I needed to shower and collect some clothing from my apartment before we left. Both daughters rolled their eyes at the father. Mom, she is my age. Jackie notified her mother over lunch a few weeks later, and it did not appear to be a one-time occurrence. They spent quite some time together. They enjoyed each other's company. I doubt he'll come crawling back to you very soon. No, you simply caught him on a good day. He presumably helped a friend's child and got lucky. She's most likely a loose woman who will sleep with anyone. Jackie answered, Your dad is a great guy, but he is not a player. You eventually decided that everything revolved around you. Was it worthwhile? For the first time, Lawrence's face revealed the strain of what she had to go through. From Rose's point of view, everything sounded much brighter than it was. She couldn't tell her kid that the lovemaking was normal. But no, it was not worth it. She couldn't say that she had never envisioned Travis doing anything other than mope over his lovely ex-wife. She was so self-absorbed that she didn't know an attractive, if not dazzling man with outstanding attributes, intelligence, and a steady profession could be highly wanted in the dating environment, and not just for the middle-aged women she knew after her divorce. Travis has dated various women, including her old friend Connie, and is currently seeing a young, promiscuous lady the same age as their eldest daughter. Instead of sulking at home, he went on dates as a single 20-year-old and received more attention than he deserved. When she found out her buddy was dating her ex, she kept it to herself, thinking it was out of sympathy. However, when the second date came, she addressed Connie discreetly, her voice clearly heightened. I thought we were friends, Con, Lauren exclaimed. You are meant to have my back. Women need to encourage one another. But he did not hurt you, Lauren. He's a good person. Amazing, in fact. He embodies everything I look for in a man. Why should I not date Trev? Women are lined up for him. He's an ideal date and a great gentleman. He is also really good in bed. I'd go out with him whenever he asks. How could you turn down such a great opportunity? Lauren stood in silence, staring at her buddy. She was beginning to see that her mistake was snowballing. She adores Travis and despises returning to an empty house every day, dreading sleeping alone at night. Travis, on the other hand, never expected his life to be so adventurous. He would have been pleased with his old dull routine, but other than that, life was treating him nicely. His job was fulfilling, and his social life was active. He enjoyed the company of women of varied ages, and many of his dates developed into intimate relationships. He wasn't actively looking for a long-term commitment, but he appreciated the diversity. There was more to life than just marrying a beautiful woman. Marla Goodling wore shoulder-length silver hair with purple streaks, pulled back into a ponytail beneath her Chicago Cubs baseball cap. Her snug blue Cubs t-shirt highlighted her large breast, and her light blue Levi's hugged her form like those of a 20-year-old. Despite being 60 years old and sitting in the left field bleachers at Wrigley Field, she received more than her fair share of attention. Travis Wesley, the ex-husband of Lauren Wesley, one of Marla's longest employees, was among those who praised her. Travis and Marla went to a Cubs game as part of their weekend break to Chicago. Marla had worked with Lauren Wesley for more than 15 years. I met Travis at many work occasions where he was accompanied by his then-wife. Marla reflected, and I always thought he was handsome and pleasant. She knew Travis and Lauren had split around 2 years earlier, and Marla had been widowed for approximately 5 years. Her husband had died in a car accident. During this time, she had only gone on one date before deciding to get Travis's phone number. Yes, Travis remembered her. He found it difficult to forget a woman who radiated both elegance and beauty. He would like to have dinner with her. Absolutely. He agreed. This occurred several months before the present moment. Their first date took place at a high-end restaurant, followed by a concert at the Philharmonic, with Marla supplying tickets. The evening ended with a kiss on her doorway. Their second date was a Saturday trek, during which Travis took intermittent rests, which made Marla laugh. It turns out that she and her late husband were ardent hikers and climbers. Despite Travis's confidence in his fitness, he realized he was mistaken. He also discovered Marla's toned figure for her age and beautiful gray eyes. The date ended with gentle lovemaking on Marla's living room rug, which followed a passionate makeout session on the sofa. Her blend of refinement and girl-next-door charm piqued his interest. Marla gladly agreed when Travis proposed a weekend of touring in Chicago for their third date. On their first outing, Marla told Travis that she had no intention of telling Lauren about their relationship. She would not deny it if asked. She had no intention of broadcasting the information. Marla also informed Travis that Lauren had told her colleagues that she and Travis were divorcing owing to irreconcilable differences. Travis repeated the same story he had told others. Lauren had cheated on him with at least 2 other guys. Without going into further detail, Travis has developed multiple strong relationships in the 2 years since his divorce and enjoys what he considers to be an outstanding bed life. His lovers admired him, and some aspired to be more than just companions. While Travis wanted to regain confidence in women and marry, Lauren had other plans, as she told her then-husband before their first date. She sought just physical fulfillment, which was still appealing to many. She didn't seek emotional ties like the majority of her companions. This fundamental difference between the ex-partners presented a problem for Jackie, who was heavily involved in wedding preparations supported by her content father. Lawrence recommended to Jackie let both parents attend the wedding unaccompanied to reduce tension, and Jackie immediately agreed, relaying the idea to her father over lunch that week. "Is this your clever idea or your mother's?" Travis inquired angrily. "I plan to bring a lady with me. I am footing the tab for this event, which I intend to enjoy with my companion. Have you taken dance lessons as I did for my wedding? It's rather endearing. No buts. Jackie." She's clearly attempting to put pressure on me, acting selfishly to swing the issue in her favor. "I'm sorry, but I won't go to my daughter's wedding without a date. If you don't have the bravery to inform her, I will. She may come alone or with a companion of her choosing." "I'll bring mine," Travis stated. "I understand, Dad. I will talk to her. I respect your point of view and am looking forward to seeing you dance. But could you possibly bring someone close to your age? That is something I can accommodate, but please watch Sonia and I dance." Travis beams and receives an equally big smile in return. Travis accompanied Connie Myong to the wedding, despite their argument about the sea green outfit he bought for her. Travis reasoned that as the bride's father dressed in a tuxedo, she needed a new dress, which he gladly paid for, and I'm sure it requires shoes, he said with a grin. Walking his eldest daughter down the aisle was one of Travis's most melancholy memories. It was exactly what other fathers had described. Nonetheless, he recognized that it was a fantastic day. He, Connie, and his children enjoyed the celebrations, dancing late into the night. The only dissonant point occurred when his ex-wife came with her own date. Travis remained indifferent. The man spent much of the ceremony leering at Travis and then at numerous other women behaving like a boorish drunk. Lawrence quickly led the man out at Jackie's request, visibly mortified. Lauren confronted Connie in the restroom and accused her of taking her lover. Connie gently rejected the accusation, explaining that Travis divorced Lauren before they started dating. Lauren grew silent, allowing Connie to leave without additional incident. Michelle visited her father a few months after the wedding, visibly apprehensive, not wanting to ruin the family's great day. Travis watched her for a moment before probing, "Okay, Mitch, what's up? You seemed tense throughout the evening." Michelle blushed intensely and started to stammer. Travis realized something was wrong. "Dad, you know Mom occasionally mentions reconciling with you, about gaining you back after she stopped seeing other guys. Did you two have any closeness?" she asked. "My personal life is not your concern, young woman," Travis snapped. "But no, I did not sleep with your mother. And what? Well, she has an STD. Dad." I overheard her talking with her pals, and she acknowledged having syphilis. Michelle spoke quietly, avoiding her father's stare. Travis appeared shocked rather than upset as Michelle watched him from the corner of her eye. "I suppose you're telling me because you're concerned about me," Travis said. "However, it is usual policy to notify all possible partners about the disease so they can be tested." "I didn't realize that," she said. "I was just concerned about you, Dad. I know Mom is still seeing other people. Some of my friends warned me that she is very promiscuous. It's always awkward when a friend admits your mother isn't ideal." A few days later, Travis received an alarming phone call from Marla. He knew she shared Michelle's fears and was likely concerned about her own health. "If you are asking if I slept with my ex, the answer is a resounding no," Travis reassured. "Believe me, Marla, I understand your concern, but I can't control my ex's behavior." Marla said, "Scandal is the kindest word I've heard about her lately." In recent months, her extracurricular activities had become the subject of gossip. It appears that the longer she is single, the more she lets down her guard. Lauren used her STD as leverage to get Travis back. She planned her reunion 6 months after being certified cured, having been satisfied with her previous encounters. She still carried hatred toward Travis for starting their divorce, which was not her initial intention. She assumed he wouldn't dare divorce someone like her, and she doubted he'd meet anybody of her class. Her strategy could have worked if other women had not pursued Travis. She was so certain in her allure that she couldn't believe Travis was drawn to others. "I know he's brilliant, but can't these women understand that he's not on my level?" she grumbled to Rose one evening as they sipped margaritas and waited for their dates. Rose encouraged her friend's lifestyle, misunderstanding Travis's depth and expecting him to sulk while she had fun. Lauren and Rose kept tabs on him following the ultimatum, only to discover that his post-divorce bed life rivaled hers. If Lauren were honest, she may concede that her ex-husband's emotional contentment appeared greater. While Travis actually loved dates, Lauren remained inside her circle, albeit not very close. After her STD scare, she experienced an extended lull. Maybe it was time for her and Travis to reunite, she reflected. Travis was startled by the voice on the other end of the line. He hadn't communicated with his ex-wife in nearly 2 years. One of his daughters must have given her his new cell phone number, even though he had not prevented them from doing so. He made it obvious that he did not see the necessity for further direct communication with her. "Hello, Travis," she said in her softest voice. "I believe it's time for us to talk. And I thought we agreed not to talk until Mikael was married. But because that hasn't happened yet, Travis suggested we go back to silence. Still the same. Travis is still attempting to deny that you love me. But deep inside, you know you want me back." She persisted. "Still the same, Lauren," he replied. "You still think that everything revolves around you." "Look, Travis, I know you're still unhappy with me, but I genuinely love you. Maybe I should have cheated on you and kept it a secret, but that would have been deceitful," she said. "It was still cheating, Lauren. Just because you told me you were going to do it doesn't make it any less genuine. You did it because you believed I would never leave you." "Do you think so little of me?" Travis stated. "I understand you think you're a 10. Held 12. Beyond that, you're stunning. I do not need to dwell in your shadow. The last several years have taught me that I am more than just the spouse of a lovely woman. Other ladies desire what I have to offer and are eager to reciprocate emotionally. My recent years have been fantastic. Why would I want to date a selfish woman again who clearly does not respect me, and despite her words, does not love me in the same manner that I loved her in the past?" He came to a conclusion. Travis turned to face the woman beside him after hanging up the phone. "Ready for round 2? Yes, Sonia." Sonia finally met and married her soulmate, while Connie and Marla maintained their relationship with Travis. He loved them both in his own unique way, but he never remarried. They too loved him in their own way, and both women embraced this dynamic. A few years later, both were invited to the wedding of his second daughter, Michelle. This irritated Lauren, who did not invite her lover. She lamented to her daughter, but Michelle showed little sympathy. Michelle said that after me, Jackie, and her family, Connie and Marla are the 2 closest persons in Dad's life. They adore him. They accept him for who he is and prioritize him over their own selfish goals, which is not something everyone can claim about themselves. He was yours, and you abandoned him for more lovemaking. Why? Simply because you feared aging and assumed he had no other options, that he would never abandon you. This is not for anyone or anything. Travis was satisfied with his life, even though it was not his first choice. He abandoned a situation that he considered undesirable. Lauren's life was not full of loneliness and regret. After all, she remained attractive and beautiful. Women generally only need to show up for men to pay notice. Lauren was regularly approached and engaged in various short-term relationships. However, none of them developed into anything significant. Lauren regretted telling her then-husband that she was leaving him, still unable to comprehend that Travis had abandoned her so easily. How could she have made such a poor assessment of the situation? She was a 12 out of 10, but he was only a 6. It should not have ended this way. Here is the next story. Sitting at the airport on Thursday morning, I wondered why I wasn't more excited. Brittany was out with my mother at Starbucks. I noticed my father walking back to the gate where I was sitting. Who knows where Taylor was? He only arrived at the last minute. My father sat down next to me and put his arm around the back of my seat. He looked at me for a moment. "What is the problem, Bob?" he asked. "You don't appear to be getting ready for a vacation," he stated. He was correct. My mood was less than positive. On the big island of Hawaii, we spent 9 days in a lovely property on Mount Alani. Why wasn't I feeling more festive? I had seen the photographs on the website. Beautiful views, tropical vegetation, our own private infinity pool. What more could you ask for? "Sorry, Father," I said. "I suppose I'm just concerned about the business." I informed him that the statement was somewhat true, and then my father went on a long, rambling explanation of why we didn't have to worry about the business. We only had 2 projects going on right now. The large one has a deck, pergola, and water feature. Albert and Roman were on. They had it under control. The other job at McKinsey was much smaller and simpler, just a simple deck and railing installation. That was not the problem. It was McKinsey's. They nitpicked every detail. If it had been up to me, I would not have agreed to take on that project. But Taylor sold it, so we were stuck with it. I looked down the concourse and saw my lovely wife, Brittany, my mother, and my brother Taylor conversing and laughing while sipping their pricey Starbucks beverages. No, I believed the business wasn't the main issue. Something seemed odd between Brittany and myself. This trip to Hawaii began as a break for just the 2 of us. Then my mother got wind of it and took over. It became a family vacation. I noticed my older brother Taylor gliding through the airport. Not a single care in the world. He was scheduled to bring his most recent girlfriend, but their relationship went apart. Then he decided not to go. He would stay at home and oversee the business, but my mother persuaded him to come solo at the last minute. To be honest, I wasn't happy he was on the vacation. I was so deep in contemplation that I missed the latest boarding announcement. "Tim." Brittany grabbed my arm. "We are boarding. Come on." She pulled me up and walked down the jetway to board. That tingle of unease persisted. I couldn't quite identify the source, but I felt something wasn't right. School has always been challenging for me. My earliest school memories were terrible. School brought me feelings of frustration and failure. I was stuck while the other youngsters improved their reading, writing, and language skills. I simply couldn't read. I now understand that I have dyslexia. However, at the time, there was no diagnosis. Some youngsters are simply slower. My teacher had warned me that I would notice my mother's disappointed expressions following the most recent parent-teacher meeting. At one time, they discussed including me in a special edition. By the time I discovered it was for mentally disabled youngsters. Fortunately, that idea had been rejected. My reading speed was slow. I wound up memorizing words. There was no way I could figure it out phonetically, so I memorized. Consider this. We all recognize the shape and color of a stop sign and know what it represents. That is how I would read. But, as I mentioned, it was a considerably slower process than usual reading. Words were symbols to me. I had to really concentrate. The thought of reading for pleasure seemed ludicrous. My brother Taylor served as the backdrop for my academic troubles. He found school simple. In general, Taylor's life appeared to be simple. He was the brightest student, the best athlete, and the most enjoyable person to be around. My parents were quite proud of Taylor and always praised him, especially my mother. I knew I was a disappointment to my mother from a young age. My father was always level-headed about me and most other issues, not my mama. Her children's success served as the yardstick against which she imagined she was assessed. Naturally, she gravitated toward Taylor. By the time I entered high school, the gap between my brother and me was wide. He was the popular, outgoing athlete, and I was the shy, sullen younger brother. Don't get me wrong, I was a very good athlete, but I didn't get as much recognition as my taller, more charismatic older brother, Taylor. Senior year, this is my sophomore year. He was one of the football team's captains. He was awarded a scholarship to play for a small but rather prestigious college in the East. Meanwhile, I participated in junior varsity football, track, and varsity wrestling. My parents never missed one of Taylor's football games, but my wrestling matches were rarely attended. My senior year, I finished fourth at state at 156 pounds, which was a decent accomplishment. My father attended the competition, but my mother did not. It would be difficult to call Taylor and I friends. I was occasionally drawn into events with him in the popular circle, but he rarely sought me out and invited me to join in. Taylor was unquestionably the center of attention in our family. I was consigned to the background. My mother was the driving force in our household. She wore the pants. My easygoing father just tagged along for the ride. This bond was especially strong because we had a family business that designed outdoor areas. Originally called Frank Boucher Landscaping, my father ran business with a few seasonal employees. When my mother became involved, everything changed. We took on larger projects, increased construction, employed more personnel, and broadened the scope of our firm. My mother believed that we needed a name that reflected the breadth of our business, and she was correct. My mother had flaws, but she was unquestionably intelligent and determined. Though my father was nominally designated as president of the company, my mother ran things throughout high school. Taylor and I worked for DOS, designing outdoor spaces on weekends, vacations, and during the summer. I enjoy the work. Reading obstacles shaped how I learned. I paid attentive attention, completely focused on my goal. This helped me well in the family business. This was one of the few instances where my abilities excelled Taylor's. When Taylor and I worked together, we were always competing. Who could complete tasks faster, who was stronger, etc. It wasn't long before I was consistently beating Taylor in these competitions. This enraged him. His younger, smaller brother was outperforming him. He justified my superior workmanship by claiming that the work was blue-collar and that he was a white-collar worker. The work was beneath him and continued on. Taylor returned to the East for an internship the summer after I graduated. That summer, I worked for our family business. I have to admit that without Taylor around, I felt a lot less stressed. My aim was to attend community college in the fall and continue working at the family business, so by the end of the summer I was leading a crew on my own. My father led the gardening team, and Roman is irritable. A long-term employee was in command of the construction crew. My mother handled the firm from her home office. The office was in a shop on my parents' sprawling 3-acre property. We had a newer family home on the land. The enormous business had the office at one end of the original tiny older house, which was now vacant on the land. The land was very expensive. Prime land was valuable in Central Oregon. Throughout high school, I had several girlfriends, nothing very serious or long-term. In high school, I was always referred to as Taylor's younger brother. So much so that I started to think of myself that way. My confidence in the opposite sex was not very high. I had several high school friends who attended the local community college with me. The social scene was far from what we had heard from friends who had attended Willamette Valley universities. Parties occur numerous times per week. Fraternity and sorority, football games and dances. My friends and I were invited to them, and we spent several weekends there to get the full college experience. We'd then return home, usually hungover and rather unhappy about the prospect of living at home and attending the local community college. One weekend, we attended an all-campus party in Eugene at a large pub that was slightly out of town. This was the type of event where you paid an entrance charge and drank keg beer till it was gone. My friends and I grew apart, and I found a space at the far end of the impromptu bar. Hanging out at the bar. There were a few benefits. You didn't have to wait in a long line for a fresh beer. Second, everyone went by you to get their beer, so you saw a lot of folks. Of course, as a healthy 19-year-old, I was interested in ladies. Currently, I did not have a girlfriend among the many lovely co-eds. I observed a tall blonde who was about 15 pounds overweight, but had a proportionate physique. The snug yellow sweater highlighted the dimensions. "Hey," I asked the blonde in yellow. "Can I help you get a beer?" I asked. She paused and looked at me, a half smile on her face. She looked me up and down, still not saying anything, just gazing at me. "What?" I questioned. I am unsure of her reaction to my simple query. "Sure." She eventually spoke. "It will keep all the males from bumping into me while I'm waiting in line." I couldn't help but peek down at her. I swiftly glanced away. I told her to take my seat on the end of the bar, and I'd get her the beer. I'd come to know the bartender, who served me fast. I returned to where the blonde was and spotted a tall fraternity guy talking to her. "Here you go," I explained as I handed the blonde the beer. I also stepped slightly ahead of the taller man. "Hello, pal," he said. "I was conversing with Brittany. Move on." I turned to look at him. Throughout my wrestling career, I was intimidated and learned how to intimidate with the appropriate look. It was a demanding stare. "Are you brave enough to challenge me?" I maintain a cool gaze on the fraternity guy. He tried to avoid my stare, but I believe he noticed something in me. He didn't want to mess around. With a curt nod, he walked away. I looked at Brittany, and she had an expression on her face when she looked at me. I believe she first spotted me as a medium-height, slim, tanned, average-looking guy. She now sensed the small edge I was carrying. Her expression brightened somewhat. "I'm Tim, and I now know your name is Brittany." I extended my hand for her to shake. She giggled and shook my hand. The smooth softness of her hand contrasted with the roughness of my work-worn hand. She held my hand slightly longer than usual. "Brittany Robinson," she said, still clutching my hand. We talked, and I learned about Brittany. She inquired about me. She was studying graphic design. She appeared little upset that I resided in Central Oregon and didn't attend university. As the evening proceeded, the rustic barn became increasingly crowded and raucous. I got closer to Brittany so that I could hear her. A little later, I wrapped an arm around her, my hand lightly grasping her waist. We were in our own intimate bubble as the celebration roared all around us. I began to wonder what the concluding chapter would be for this evening. On the one hand, I really want to have sex with her. On the other hand, so far I've liked her for sex too quickly. Sabotage any hope of a long-term connection. An announcement was quickly delivered over an electronic megaphone. The buses that had transported guests to the barn were returning to campus. "Oh, that's me," she said, looking at me. We both just stood there, stunned by the abrupt conclusion to a lovely evening. "Brittany, I stated it was nice to meet you, and I stuttered, unsure what to say." She said, "Give me your phone." I did, and she established a new contact, Britt. She gave me a short hug and kiss on the lips before hurrying off to the buses. She smiled back once, kissed her palm, and blew me a kiss. It had been a good night. Throughout the next week, I thought about Brittany. She had a lovely face and stunning blonde hair. As I already stated, she appeared to be little overweight, not too much. She was definitely my type. I had classes all day Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as Tuesday, Thursday, and occasionally Saturdays. I worked for a family business. On the Tuesday after meeting Brittany, I was working on a hardscape project for a client, and Sisters Roman Kral took the lead on the project. Roman had worked with my father for many years. He was really skilled at his job, yet he could be an asshole. He constantly treated me and Taylor with contempt. When we were in high school, Taylor and I went to our father and demanded that he get rid of Roman. Our father dismissed our objections and stated that Roman was the best employee we had. He went on to say that Roman was never late, never sick, knew the business, and was devoted. It's either he or we. Taylor threatened our father. I believe McDonald's is hiring. He instructed us not to look up from the paperwork he was doing on that Tuesday. I guess I was daydreaming about Brittany, and Roman lashed out at me. "Pay attention! Prost!" He yelled at me, and a heavy stack of pavers nearly collapsed on my foot. "Were you at the job site? Not in your cozy home? Pay attention! It's dangerous when you're not thinking about your job." He scolded me. He irritated me off. Why is our employee bossing me around? Later, I thought about it, and Roman was correct. On the job site, I or someone else could be heard rather well. I decided to apologize to Roman since I felt badly. Also, perhaps he'd be kinder to me. Roman. I apologized for messing up today. I told him I anticipated some sort of response. All I got was a stern glare from Roman. That was it. Oh well, the person was, as I already stated, an asshole. Later that week, I messaged Brittany. I inquired about her week and informed her that my friends and I were planning a trip to Eugene this weekend. I asked her what she had planned for the weekend. By Thursday night, I had not heard from her. I thought my spirits were down, but then she sent me a message on Friday morning. "Hey, you had a big party at the Commons on Saturday night. I will wait for you. See you there." Suddenly, my spirits rose. My mates and I had planned to go to the football game on Saturday, and now we understood where the party was going. By the time we arrived in the Commons, there was a scene. The gathering was held in the parking lot. Tents and canopies are set up all over the place. You paid a set fee to get in, and they handed you a wristband for the keg beer. Once we arrived, I wondered how I would ever find Brittany among all the people. I shouldn't have worried. Within 15 minutes, she had located me. She embraced me with a huge hug and squished herself against me. I could see she'd already had a few beers. I looked at Brittany for a time, holding her hands and admiring her gorgeous blonde hair, a rather cheerful face, bright crimson lipstick. Then I gazed at her physique. Yeah, it was still a little heavy, but that was fine. She wore a low-necked, tight, bright red top. This shirt showed a lot of her cleavage. I could not help myself. I looked at her cleavage. Perhaps a moment too long. "Take it easy, big boy." She spoke as she caught my stare. She laughed as she instructed me to try to maintain eye contact. "Sorry," I responded, and I simply nodded toward her cleavage. She laughed again, took my hand, and we walked happily into the celebration. We had a wonderful experience. I learned a bit more about Brittany. She majored in graphic design and minored in computer science. She must be intelligent. I assumed I knew a lot of the kids there and everything was good. We spent some time hanging out with her pals, and I met a few new folks. As we stood there, this bigger guy approached and hung around on the outside of our group. Suddenly, I recognized him. He played for the university football squad. His name was Donovan Mims. My junior year, my high school football team played against Mims. Mims was from Redmond in our league and lived fairly near to my high school. We won, but Mims was the standout. Now I glanced at him. 6 feet, 2 inches tall, broad in the shoulders, and powerful. 3 or 4 inches taller than me. He had the same athletic assurance that my brother Taylor does. Just then, Brittany asked me to go get her another beer. It took around 10 minutes. When I returned, I saw her talking with Mims. As I approached, she moved away and returned to me. He gave me a look and walked away. "What was all this about?" I asked her. She was quiet for a time before shaking her head as if it didn't matter. I dropped it. The pleasant vibes and excitement of the party resumed, and I forgot about that strange interval. The party ended. It was late, and the kegs were dry. Brittany and I were in a dark, rather private section of the parking lot. We began kissing. We both had a lot to drink, but we weren't drunk. We proceeded to kiss in this private spot. "Where are you staying tonight?" she asked me breathlessly. For a second, I wondered whether this was an overnight invitation. I informed her that I was staying on the floor of a buddy's dorm room. "That's too bad," she replied, "and I don't want to spend our first time in a dark alley." She told me as she observed our surroundings. "I'd be in great trouble if I tried to sneak you into my sorority room," she warned me. She said, "Walk me home." We walked the dark streets of campus to her sorority. She hugged my arm and pushed against my side. I was also really agitated throughout the way home. We soon arrived at the doorway of the enormous brick sorority home. We stood there, hugging and kissing for a few minutes. I think I got to go inside. She finally informed me. I nodded. "Call me this week," she said. "I can't wait to see you again," she said. "And next time we'll work out this privacy thing," she said, laughing. I was in a terrific mood as I drove home with my mates that Sunday. It felt like there was something going on between me and Brittany. During the week, I heard from Brittany, who told me where the all-campus party was for the upcoming weekend. I said I'd meet her there. There was no mention of motels, sex, privacy, or any of the unresolved issues from last weekend. But I knew about the upcoming weekend. I wanted to have Brittany alone. I was enthusiastic and in an unusually outgoing mood. Driving to Eugene. That night, my 2 mates and I went to the all-campus party. This week, it was at one of the larger fraternities. It was packed with people, but Brittany was able to find me last week, and I went casually throughout the massive mansion, content in that knowing. The fraternity home has a large main floor where the majority of the celebration was held. It also featured a large yard that was crowded with people. There was a basement and a huge, broad staircase leading up to the second floor. With my beer in hand, I gently made my way through the party. Keep an eye out for that blonde hair. I think I've been there for half an hour and there's still no sign of Brittany. I observed a gathering of girls, including a handful of her friends whom I had been introduced to. I casually approached their group. "Hello, Erin." I addressed a small redhead. "Have you spotted Brittany around Brittany Robinson?" she asked. I nodded, smiling. "Yeah," she said. "I know she is here." A large group of us walked over from the sorority together. "I haven't seen her in a while," she remarked, before hastily returning her gaze to the frat house. "I get it. Thanks." I told her and walked away. I chose to text her. "Hello, where are you?" I forwarded it to her. I continued to look around the party, wondering why I hadn't seen Brittany. I had walked across the main level twice and inspected the outdoor space. I figured I'd check outdoors again. I observed my two friends in a group with some girls outdoors. I started staring at the enormous cedar deck in the fraternity house's backyard. I noticed that it was more than 24 inches on center, and the worn cedar boards were flexing under the weight of the partygoers. As I stood there examining the shoddy construction on the deck, Cody, one of the guys I drove over with, grabbed me. "Hey, I spotted the lady you've been hanging with, the blonde with large melons." He described her. I nodded as if to say, "Go on." She was hanging out with the man we played football against in Redmond, who now plays college football here. Sims, I believe his name is. He told me. "Mims," I murmured under my breath. "Where have you seen them?" I asked. "In the fraternity." He extended his thumb back over his shoulder toward the house. They appeared to be headed up to the second story. "Cody told me." "Okay, thank you, Cody," I informed him, trying hard to appear entirely unconcerned. I walked in. I felt a rush of emotion run down my spine. I believe it was a combination of jealousy and fury. As I climbed the steps, I noticed a big hallway to the left. Most of the rooms down the corridor had their doors open, and people were enjoying small room parties in their own dorms. Perfectly innocent. There were a few rooms with doors entirely closed. I walked along the hall, nodding and greeting those I recognized. So far, there is no trace of Brittany. I was almost at the end of the corridor when I spotted the door slightly ajar and peeked inside. There were a few individuals in the area, and I noticed a couch with her blonde hair and distinct contours. Sat Brittany is sharing a passionate kiss with Donovan Mims. I pushed the door partially open and walked just within the threshold. "There you are, Brittany," I replied calmly. There was no trace of the wrath I was experiencing. "I tried texting you. Perhaps your phone was turned off or you were busy." I stated this while maintaining eye contact with Mims, and with that I turned and departed. I pondered leaving as angry as I was at the time, but then I decided, screw her. I planned to enjoy the party and maybe get a little intoxicated. I decided that I wasn't going to run away with my tail between my legs. I forced myself to be an outgoing, happy-go-lucky partygoer, although knowing that my fury was simmering beneath the surface. Are you mad at Mims? Certainly upset at Brittany, but really mad at myself. I had invested too much emotion in a few casual interactions. The remainder of the party was uneventful. Brittany looked my way several times. I ignored her and ended up having a very enjoyable time. Much later, when my friends and I were leaving, we came within a few feet of Brittany and her sorority pals, Timothy. She addressed me with a questioning tone, without turning to face her or saying anything. I raised my right arm and waggled my hand back and forth. "See you." That was my final interaction with Brittany for quite some time. I continued to attend parties in Eugene, although less regularly. I've seen her at a few parties and events. Mims was usually close by her side. It appeared like they were romantically involved. Life carried on, and any memories of Brittany or an interrupted romance were practically extinguished. Deep down, a glimmer of a flame remained for her. But I tried my best to ignore it. 6 years later, my crew had just arrived at a major outdoor living job site in Redmond. It was me, Albert, and Jimmy, his nephew. We had to remove an old cedar deck, clear some overgrown landscape, level the ground, install a combination of hardscape and ground-level decking, and build a patio cover. It was a $54,000 job. Surprisingly, this was seen as an average job within the family firm. Dos, which designs outdoor areas, had flourished in recent years. There is no fake modesty. I believe I played a significant role in this. I completed 1 year of community college, but classroom learning did not suit me. I adored our family business. One of my abilities was the ability to swiftly assess a job site and begin dividing it into smaller tasks that led to the target. I feel my difficulties with reading contributed to exceptional organizing skills and a near photographic memory, despite the fact that I was not as great a craftsman as Roman or my father. I had other strengths. Grouchy Roman would occasionally give me a marginally good compliment, if we had a proper corporate setup. My mother would be the CEO. She managed the scheduling, money, and marketing. My father or I would visit customers, make sales calls, and produce proposals. This was my least favorite activity. My mother would organize the materials and workers after the job was sold. We had 3 crews. Albert and I were usually together. My father specialized in landscaping and had a staff. Finally, Roman was our lead carpenter. Roman's craftsmanship more than compensated for his negative attitude. We would occasionally collaborate, but it was more efficient and profitable for all 3 groups to work individually. The business was located on a prime piece of property within the urban expansion borders. My father's father had originally purchased the property for a few $1,000s. There was a family trust on the land that was intended to maintain it in the family. The office and shop were located in front of the main road. There was a small, decrepit house near the shop that was now uninhabited. My parents lived there when they initially got married. The larger house where I grew up and lived with my parents was located up the hill. It was never done, and I was frequently asked to help install, trim, hang a door, or paint something. I'd done a lot of work on this house over the years. I bought my own house in downtown while attending community college. It was little and required a great deal of labor, but the price was reasonable at the time. Its value has risen dramatically in recent years. Another reason I bought it was to move out of my family's shadow, especially my mother. I required isolation. I worked with them all day. My mother was always praising something great that Taylor had accomplished, and maybe it was just my imagination, but she always seemed disappointed in me. My laid-back father completely missed this. I was grateful I had my own home to return to at the end of the day. That morning, as Albert, Emmy, and I were prepared to dismantle the old wood deck on the job site in Redmond, my mother called, "Tim, can you run over and give a bid on a project in Pinecone Springs?" she asked her mother. I inquired because I was filthy, and we were almost finished with the rip-out. "The Eldridges are departing for California this afternoon," she said. "It's a large job, and they'd like to be present to share their ideas about what they want," she said. "Where is Dad?" I asked. "Can't he do it?" She told me that they're all down at Sun Ridge. Shit, I thought I didn't enjoy this portion of my job. I went to the address she gave me, Pinecone Springs. I was going to meet Carlton Eldridge there. I was back at work in Redmond 2.5 hours later, most likely wealthy. Eldridge turned out to be a really nice person. He was an attorney who lived largely in Silicon Valley. Clearly, he had money. He seemed polite, and we talked briefly. I'd taken notes, measured, and promised him we'd email him his portion. When I saw Jimmy and Albert, I knew something was up. Jimmy was smiling and laughing, but Albert continued to frown at him. Fortunately, they appeared to have achieved some tasks. "What's happening?" I asked Albert. Jimmy was still beaming. Albert only glanced at Jimmy and shook his head foolishly. He said and nodded to Jimmy. Jimmy said in a loud whisper, "Boss, do you have a scenario next door?" He pointed to the fence on the south side. He informed me about a blonde chica with large tobaccos in a bikini. I cast a glance toward the fence. I could immediately imagine what had happened. Jimmy was probably up on a ladder taking down the old overhead structure. He would have an excellent view of the neighbor's yard. Someone was probably sitting outside in the sun. It's all absolutely innocuous. Unless it's the neighbor's 15-year-old daughter, then we resemble perverts. This is not good for the company. "Why don't you take a break for lunch?" I informed them. I decided to assess whether I needed to undertake damage control with the neighbor. Who knows what they saw or heard from Jimmy? I rang the neighbor's doorbell. I waited. Nothing. I tried again. I was ready to turn around and leave when I noticed movement at the door. I took a step down from the front porch. A blonde woman wearing enormous dark sunglasses and a cover-up answered the door. "Hello, ma'am," I started. "I'm with Doss," and we're going to be doing some work on your neighbor's house next door, so I wanted to make sure we didn't bother you." I went on. She was quiet for a minute, as if studying me. "Timothy." She inquired, and I believed I knew the voice. "Yes." I paused. She removed her sunglasses, and I thought I knew her. "Brittany Robinson." I stated that with a stunned look on my face. "Wow, it has been a while. Is this your home?" "Yes. Well, I am house-sitting, but here is where I live," she stated. "But it is now Brittany Mims, at least for another month," she told me. I stood there for a minute, shocked by the coincidence. I hadn't seen Brittany in years, and I had no idea she lived in Central Oregon. I assumed she was married to Donovan, but the "at least for another month" phrase piqued my curiosity. We chatted for a few minutes to catch up. I went on to mention that we'd be on this work for a few weeks and that we'd do our best not to bother her. "Tim," she said, "don't worry, you won't bother me." She gave me a wide smile. That was an intriguing comment. I couldn't take my thoughts off Brittany all day. I pondered about her marital status. I was also curious what she looked like under the cover-up. According to Jimmy, she looked quite good. We continued working on Brittany's neighbor's project. I once saw her driving a black Outback and waved to her. Aside from that, there has been no trace of Brittany this week. Friday afternoons, I frequently let the guys go a couple of hours early but compensated them. That occurred this Friday. I was in the backyard reviewing our work and making mental notes on the strategy for the coming week. I was interrupted while deep in meditation. "Hello, Tim." Brittany appeared over the fence. "It's about 5 o'clock. How about some beer?" she asked. I paused. My first instinct was to decline, but I paused for a moment. There was still a glimmer of intrigue in her, and what happened in college occurred a long time ago. While I was conducting these mental calculations, she called back. "Tim, this is just a beer. I promise I will not bite." She replied with a laugh. "Yes," I agreed. She let me enter by a side gate. She was dressed casually in shorts and a t-shirt. There were no bikinis, as Jimmy had observed, but those melons in that tight t-shirt looked good. We sat at a patio table on her backyard deck. A lounge chair sat next to the deck. Brittany entered via a set of French doors to get the drinks. I observed the house and yard. That was nice. I knew she was house-sitting. I assumed whoever owned it was doing well. "Tim, I have to admit you look great," she told me. There is no fake modesty. I thought I looked pretty fine. I was slim and muscular from work. I also joined to a gym and stay in shape there. I knew I was tanned, and the sun had lightened my sandy hair. I felt fantastic, too. "Thank you, Brittany." I spoke as I stared at her. "You've always looked good, and I believe you've improved with age," I said. She grinned at the comment. "I still need to drop some weight," she admitted, looking down at her figure. My gaze follows the same path down her shapely physique. I guess she noticed me staring. Certain things never change. She laughed and spoke to me. "What?" I inquired in confusion. "You always enjoyed staring at my tits." She laughed. "And I've just caught you again." She grinned and looked me directly in the eyes. I felt humiliated. "Sorry," I told her. "It's okay," she said, still smiling. "It's flattering that I can still catch a man's eye with these. Sorry, I'm only joking with you." Things calmed down after that. We had a typical conversation and caught up on our history from early college. I informed her about our family business and how I create outdoor areas in my work. She introduced herself as an independent web designer and inquired as to who had created our website. It was a pleasant and comfortable adult talk that included both personal and professional topics. I informed her that our website had not been updated and that we required assistance. She seemed to make a mental note of this. Finally, she talked briefly about Donovan and her marriage. Donovan and I married during our final year of college. She told me he and I dated intermittently throughout school. "When I met you, we were off. I truly loved you in college." Donovan noticed this and worked hard to contact me again. "I never fully explained anything to you or apologized. I felt horrible." She informed me that it was a long time ago. I said to her, never revealing how much it hurt at the time. We relocated to Redmond, near his family. He works as a mortgage broker and is successful. There was some cheating, so we divorced. Nothing too bitter. I believe we got married too young. Not all of the wild oats had been sold, she continued, looking off into the distance. We are still friendly, if not really friends. She mentioned that the beers were emptied and that the conversation, while good, was coming to an end. I got up and thanked Brittany for the beer. There was some mild uneasiness. I felt unnaturally connected to Brittany after not seeing her in a few years. "Maybe I'll see you next week," I announced. "Sure." When she inquired, I was again perplexed. "I think I only meant that I'll be next door working until next week," I stated. "Oh," she replied, "of course next door." For a little while she was perplexed and possibly dissatisfied after misinterpreting my statement. And then she gave me a lovely, quick, firm hug. And then I left. Driving home, my thoughts were racing. This was the girl that dumped me abruptly in college. There were many evenings when I cursed her. Nevertheless, she turned me on. I liked her. I remember a similar feeling from college. I knew I wasn't the most outgoing person, yet it was easy to chat to Brittany and our conversations felt comfortable. I was going to have to think about it all. The following week, my crew and I worked at the house adjacent to Brittany's. Part of me hoped to run into her, but another part of me said to slow down. Thursday night, after we'd packed up for the day, I discovered a note on my windshield. "What about a drink and dinner tomorrow night? This is my place, 5:30 pence." I pondered about the invitation all evening. I wasn't certain I wanted to get engaged with Brittany. On the other hand, I knew I liked being with her and liked the way she looked. I kept moving back and forth. Friday at midday, I still hadn't responded to Brittany. It was a scorching day. I was filthy and sweaty from all the labor. Emmy and Albert were on a lunch break and I was observing the plants. Knock, knock. Brittany entered through the gate. "I wanted to make sure you received my note," she explained. "I had not heard back from you," she inquired, staring at me with a half smile. I looked at Brittany. She was wearing white shorts and the tightest top I had ever seen, which was virtually translucent. Everything that was supposed to be hidden was suddenly on display. A tight shirt served as a minimal covering. I stuttered. "Sure," when I stupidly inquired. "I've told you." She stated 530 with faux irritation. "See you then," she stated, then turned and walked back through the gate. That settled it. I began to wonder if she had worn the tight shirt on purpose. Probably, I thought. Oh well, it's only a drink and dinner. It had been a hot day, and I was grimy. I kept a clean pair of gym shorts, a backup t-shirt, and flip-flops in the truck. At 530, I knocked on Brittany's door, carrying my clean clothing out back. She called from the backyard. She sat at the table, still dressed in the tight attire she had worn during the day. "Sorry, I'm a little dirty," I said. "I have a casual change of clothes. I didn't have enough time to get home and return." I assured her that you looked fine. She said this with a smile. "If you wish, you can take a fast shower," she offered. "Actually, a shower would be ideal," I informed her, and she showed me the guest bathroom. It's strange to think after so many years. I was now nude in Brittany's home. It was also really exciting. While I was cleaning up in the warm shower, I noticed a little change in the atmosphere in the bathroom, as well as a rush of cool air. Right suddenly, the heavy glass shower door rolled open, more cool air, and in step, Brittany, nude. "Hi," she said. "I hope everything is okay," I admit. "I thought about you naked in here." "Well, I wanted to see," she informed me with a smile, looking me up and down. She wanted to see. I finally got to see her live and in color. She finally told me. "Finally what?" I asked. "Finally, I understand," she said. "I was close to you in college, but never got to do anything with you." She smiled as she told me that we had finally accomplished something. I felt the same way she did, but something else was tickling the back of my mind, and I believe I knew what it was. The memories and discussions about our early connection rekindled my resentment and suspicion. Normally, following a new sexual encounter, especially with someone I appear to get along with, I would feel pleased, and for the most part. Sitting in Brittany, we are both naked. I was relieved that there was only a slight sense of discomfort. Later, we had drinks and dinner made by Brittany on her balcony in the sunny evening. We maintained our comfortable, pleasant discussion, but with a deeper level of intimacy. After the sexual encounter, I was having fun. After dinner. Brittany abruptly stopped talking and simply looked at me. "What?" I asked. She simply continued to look. I gave her a look like, "What is up, Tim?" "We should go inside," she suggested. I collected her and laid her on the chaise lounge beside the table. I conducted a quick reconnaissance of the neighbors and found only one house that could see into our backyard, and the shades were closed. We had sex. I enjoyed every moment of it. As we lie in peaceful contentment, I started to wonder what this meant, if it was merely a one-time event. I suppose I was comfortable with that. If things escalated, as I hoped, we'd have to have a talk. Our college interactions cast a shade on our prospective future connection. I was tempted to spend the night, but I chose to return home. It had been a good evening. I had fantastic sex, a delicious meal, and liked Brittany's company, beyond the physical interaction. Over the weekend, while working on my parents' house, I remembered Friday night and Brittany. I knew the appropriate protocol would be a phone call, an invitation to coffee or a drink, or a check and text message. I didn't do any of this, and I'm not sure why. I suppose if I looked closely, I could detect similarities between today and our college friendship, which had not gone well. Maybe I was only protecting myself. Regardless, life continued. On Monday and Tuesday, Albert, Jimmy, and I continued working on the project adjacent to Brittany's. I didn't see her. Wednesday, I found a note in a cute little sealed envelope on my car. "Hey, call me if you want." That was the message. I didn't call her on Wednesday, but as I was driving to my vehicle Thursday, I noticed her in her jet black Outback pulling out of the garage. I stepped to the side of the road and stopped to speak with her. "Hi." I replied, "I received your note, thanks." She had her window down and large black glasses covered her face. No welcoming grin. Her face was expressionless and she had not spoken a word. They just stared at me blankly. I felt a chill, and it wasn't from the car's air conditioning. We've been quite busy," I stammered. "I was about to call you." I continued to dig myself a deeper hole. She interrupted my rambling with, "Tim, enough. I got it. I was only a fling. A bump and run. This is an easy job. I just assumed we had something more than that. Anyway, I need to get moving." She turned to face the road, focused on her destination. "Brittany, please wait," I said as she began to take off. "I want to see you again." I spoke to her. "I'd like to explain myself. Can we have supper this weekend?" I asked. She sat for a minute looking at me with the same blank expression. All she said was, "Call me," and then she left. I called her and she agreed to have supper with me on Saturday night. We walked downtown to a nice Italian restaurant called Pedro's. The walls were decorated with wooden marionettes. It was a nice, intimate setting. Throughout dinner, we maintained the same conversational ease that I'd always had with Brittany. She was a little reserved at first, but we worked past it. At the conclusion of the evening, I invited her over for a nightcap. I started thinking about the sexual delights we had last week, but after the nightcap, she claimed she had to leave. We hugged goodbye, and I kissed her. She responded with an enthusiastic kiss. As she went, she informed me that this time you should call me. I grinned and waved. I knew I was going to call her. Our restored connection began. We would communicate frequently and visit each other several times every week. The intercourse resumed after I called her and asked her out, and it was nice. Sexually, we were quite compatible. Most weekends, we would spend the night together. After several months, I decided it was time for Brittany to meet my mother and father. As I previously stated, I worked with my dad at our family business designing outdoor areas. My father founded the company more than 25 years ago, but it has only been in the last 10 years that things have truly taken off. My mother is responsible for my progress. My father is a gentle, easygoing man who always sees the good in people. My mother, on the other hand, is intelligent, ambitious, and calculated. There is no question about who wears the pants in that relationship. And even while my mother recognizes the value I provide to the company, she still considers me like an employee. Even though Taylor lives on the East Coast, it appears like she includes some form of compliment about him on a weekly basis, frequently with some vague reference to me and my inadequacies. I was a little apprehensive about Brittany meeting my parents, though. My mother requested a family meal at their house on the property. I insisted on a downtown restaurant. I made reservations at Whiskey Cat, a steakhouse in the middle of town. I preferred that the initial meeting take place on neutral ground. Any nervousness I could have had suddenly vanished. My father was as friendly and charming as ever. But my mother surprised me. She was nice and personable, asking Brittany about herself and seems to be sincere throughout the discussion. I was thrilled and thankful for my mother's excellent behavior. Brittany and my mother seemed to get along pretty well. Much later, I reflected on the fact that my mother did not treat me as well as she treated my lover. As we continued to date and our connection became more intimate, I realized we needed to talk about Donovan. The few times I brought it up, Brittany simply rejected it. I let it go, understanding the grief of a failed relationship, particularly one including adultery. We had come back from dinner one night. My house was a short walk away, and we were in a calm, cheerful mood. As we mounted the steps to my door, I whispered to Brittany, hand in hand, on the way home. I think it's time we talked about our relationship, I told her. Okay, she replied, but what is there to talk about? I love you. Do you adore me, I think? And we have a lovely life. Oh, she added. And our sex life isn't too horrible, she added with a smile. I held her, caressed her hips, and told her I knew everything. But in a slightly more serious tone, I inquired about her marriage. She quickly grew silent, and the happy-go-lucky attitude of earlier was vanished. If we are to take the next step in this relationship, I need to know more about your past, including your marriage, I told her. She pondered for a moment and thought, okay. She moaned in agreement. Then she gave me the story. She and Donovan had an on-and-off relationship throughout college, mostly on. However, they were not together when I first met her in college. She admits to sleeping with 2 more people besides Donovan. I'd have been number 3. She informed me that if things had turned out differently that night at the Commons their senior year, they would still be together. There are no breakups. Donovan had been injured in the first football game of the season and had medically retired. He was more present, and their friendship got stronger that year. He proposed to her just before graduation, and they moved to his hometown of Redmond, which is not far from where I grew up and currently live. Donovan got into the mortgage business, and Brittany started building websites on her own. Donovan's timing was ideal, with interest rates falling sharply. He was making a lot of money by investing in the growing local real estate market. They eventually separated and divorced. I inquired about the circumstances of the breakup. She simply restated that they had married young and drifted apart. She informed me that there was no longer animosity between the two. In reality, she continued to handle his website. When I questioned about the infidelity, Brittany refused to discuss anything. Too painful, I suppose. Brittany told me that she and Donovan remained friends. I considered that. Slightly unpleasant. Her ex-husband used to screw her. She maintained her friendship with him. I needed to think about it a little more. I thought this was a positive step in our relationship. Sharing this knowledge, I learned a little more about the woman I had fallen in love with. Our relationship progressed with few, if any, obstacles. Brittany planned to move in with me after the people she was house-sitting for returned from their charity mission in West Africa. This was another significant step in our relationship. Brittany also started managing the website for our family business. She collaborated with my mother on this, and the two became acquainted, if not downright pals. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, even though I was an important part of the family business. My mother treated me like a hired laborer. Brittany began to explain the benefits of refinancing my downtown home. Interest rates have reduced, allowing me to lower my payments. She mentioned that Donovan may help me with the refinance. I thought about it, and I realized she was correct. I wasn't sure I wanted to introduce Donovan into our lives. The neighbor just behind me was a hoarder. There was stuff all over her land. Stacks of rubbish are partially covered with blue tarps, a rusted old vehicle of some kind. A lean-to shed has partially collapsed. It was a mess. I had gotten to know the owner when my back fence, which divided our land, collapsed in a windstorm. I promised her I would fix it, and I did. Every few months, she'd ask me to assist her with some sort of home repair. I felt bad for her and typically assisted. One night, I was at home alone when the doorbell rang. It was Hilda. This was odd. Normally, she would simply yell over the fence. After exchanging a few pleasantries, she got to the point. "Tim," she said, "I am dying. The doctors give me a month, perhaps 2. That is it," she added. "Oh, Hilda," I exclaimed, "that is dreadful. I moved to embrace her." She waved me away. "I'm shocked I've lived this long, but I'm here to see if you'd want to purchase my property and take muffins," she said to me as I stared at her puzzled. "Muffins? My kitty. I need $150,000. I'm selling as is. It's yours if you want it. she explained. "It is probably worth more than that. But I don't want real estate agents probing and prodding through my belongings. If you say no, I'll go to the older hole next to you and offer him a shot. But I'd rather sell to you," she explained. I hesitated for a bit before telling her I'd accept it. I warned her that it could take a few weeks to receive the money. "That's fine," she replied. "The money is for my daughter in Idaho. I have not been much of a mother to her. Sending her money is the least I can do. She told me that while I was aware that the property was worth much more, cleaning it up would be a major undertaking. The home was torn down. I've always liked cats, so Muffin shouldn't be an issue. Now I assumed I'd have to meet with Donovan. Later that week, I met with Donovan. He had a great office on the main floor of a new mixed-use brick building in Redmond. I observed a Fitness Plus gym on the street level near to his office. I had a local Fitness Plus membership. I didn't know where there was one in Redmond, too. Above his workplace, there appeared to be 4 floors of residential buildings, most likely apartments or condos, all new and pricey. We met in his office, although I had never been formally introduced to him. He greeted me with familiarity. Donovan was a nice-looking guy who was huge from football but had kept his weight down. He was kind and enjoyable to talk to. I couldn't tell if he was genuinely pleasant or slick enough to make people believe it. I signed approximately 1,000 sheets of paper. I refinanced at a lower rate and had enough equity to cover the additional $150,000 for Hilda. My monthly payment increased by a total of $81. Donovan later told me a little about his business. He had created the mixed-use building, which included his office, a gym, and flats above. He told me that he worked on the project with 2 pro football players he knew from college. He was in the process of renting out the other units on the top floors. Despite my initial reservations, I ended up like Donovan. He appeared like a kind man. In the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about how he used to screw Brittany all the time. I attempted to keep those ideas to a minimum. So far, I liked him, and he promised to help me get Hilda's property. Brittany came in a few months later. Our relationship was going well. She and I had fun together. We appear to have similar life goals, and our sexual experiences were amazing. She was now the web designer at DOS. She would engage with my mother, and they appeared to have a good, cordial connection. A part of me envied that bond with my mother. She appeared to be enjoying a closeness with my mother that I had never experienced. Strange dynamics. Meanwhile, our family business was thriving. We had 3 crews working on assignments that were expected to last months. We'd started talking about hiring a full-time salesperson. This would give my father and me more time to complete our tasks, and it appeared that I was becoming increasingly responsible for these sales calls. My father was slowing down a bit. He was still productive and did excellent work, but 25 years of heavy labor had taken a toll on my easygoing father. Aside from our business and my relationship with Brittany, I was busy. Hilda died, leaving me with the awful task of cleaning up her home and property. I was also recruited at least once a week to help out at my parents' house, doing tasks for my mother up there. One night, Brittany and I were naked in bed. Timothy. She asked me, using my full name when we were going to marry. She asked. I sat quietly for a few moments. My silence must have disturbed her. "Tim," she asked again. "Wait a minute." I laughed in protest. "I was going to have some fun," I answered. "Well, no one's having any fun until you answer my question," she said. I thought for a moment. I adored Brittany. I could not imagine being without her. Brittany was always in my mind's eye as I imagined my future. We were still young, but I knew deep down that I wanted to marry her. She may simply be accelerating the timeline slightly. Brittany. I told her that I loved her and wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. With that, she shouted, pushed back the blankets, and buried my face against her. A little later, I had her screaming in a new way. It was a good night. The next day, I received a phone call from my mother, which surprised me. "Why haven't you told me?" she asked. "I was at a job site in Sunridge." "Tell you what," I asked. "Was there anything on my project she needed to know about?" "Brittany told me that she and you were engaged," she said. "Brittany is a great young woman. She and I had already started discussing wedding plans. We have a lot to accomplish in a short amount of time. Have you chosen out a ring?" She went on to chat without my having to contribute anything. Later, once I got off the phone with my mother, I considered this development. Sure, I told Brittany that I wanted to spend my life with her, but was it a proposal? She definitely took it that way. Thinking about the problem, I suppose I knew we'd be married someday. It's just happening much faster than I expected, and now my mother got involved. My mother brought up a topic when I was preoccupied with wedding planning. I assume Taylor will be the best man, she said, rather than asking. I hadn't thought about Taylor in a long time, as I had previously stated. He and I were not close. He lived someplace on the East Coast and worked in finance. I rarely mentioned him and almost never talked to him. I'm sure Taylor will be delighted to serve in that capacity, my mother replied, as if I had already consented. Yeah, Mom, I'll think about it. I spoke to her. I don't think there is much to think about. He's your only brother, she stated with finality. Now for the tuxedos. Over the course of the next few months, she proceeded to organize more aspects for my wedding. Everything was coordinated by my mother and Brittany. Taylor came just as I was half expecting my mother to enter with nude images of the stripper I was going to have at my bachelor party the Monday before the wedding. That evening, we held a small reception at my parents' home on the family property. There were a few family members and close friends. Taylor was really polite when I introduced him to Brittany. A soft hug and a bright smile. Taylor was pleasant, asking Brittany how we met and about her profession. Later, he approached with a big smile. You did well, little brother, he told me. Brittany is a nice girl. Good thing I didn't see her first, he remarked with a giggle, punching me in the shoulder. I gave him a look. I wondered where that remark had originated from. It seemed inappropriate given the occasion. Just kidding, bro. He chuckled as he mixed around. Later, when the evening was finally over and Brittany and I were on our way home, she mentioned Taylor. I thought your brother was nice, a perfect gentleman, she said. I considered that. I had informed Brittany about Taylor and our childhood friendship. I told her how he constantly sought the limelight and how my mother had always preferred him. I also considered that comment. A perfect guy. I thought it unusual. Brittany had discussed who would be invited to the wedding months before it took place. I was quite laid back about these things and left most of it to my mother and Brittany. There was one name we didn't completely disagree on, but it was more than a dispute: Donovan. Brittany insisted on inviting her ex-husband. This made me uneasy. Yes, I met Donovan, and he assisted me with my refinance. And yeah, Donovan was a great man who invited me out twice to enjoy a beer. I declined both, but it was difficult to ignore that this was the same person who had repeatedly screwed my soon-to-be wife over the years. That accounted for 99% of the wedding planning. Brittany had her way. Donovan planned to attend. She had even persuaded my mother to agree with her on this matter. The wedding itself was enjoyable. The entire wedding, including the ceremony and reception, was held on my family's property in an open field between the office and my parents' enormous home. Tables and chairs were set up, with large white tents covering them in case of inclement weather. Brittany and I mingled all evening. We spent time together and apart. We were both congratulated and requested to participate in photographs and other chores with various persons. At one point, I realized I hadn't seen Brittany in quite some time. I began looking around for her. Taylor walked up at that time. "Are you seeking for a gorgeous bride?" he asked. He smiled slightly. Yes, I was," I told Taylor. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and turned me, so now I was peering down the slope at his chin. He pointed to a picnic table near a scrub pine tree, away from the wedding celebrations and the other guests, where Brittany sat in her flowing white bridal gown, having what appeared to be a long and serious chat with Donovan. I tried to break up their comfortable little conversation, but Taylor grabbed me and wouldn't let go. "Easy, bro." He spoke calmly to me. "Do not cause a scene on your wedding day. I will keep an eye on them." He insisted that everything was completely innocent. I thanked him, took one final glance, and was ushered away by a group of pals. As I departed, I felt a distinct sense of thankfulness to Taylor. He rarely did me any favors. That was not for his advantage either. It temporarily improved my opinion of him. Brittany then appeared, and the wedding festivities resumed. My observations of her and Donovan having an intimate talk were nearly forgotten. We spent our honeymoon on Big Island, Kona. We slept at the Kona Plantation Spa and Resort, a massive stucco structure with swimming pools, palm tree gardens, ocean views, and a number of excellent restaurants. Brittany looked amazing in her bikinis. She had tried to lose weight before the trip, and while she could still shed a little more, she looked great. One day we met a couple from Canada at the pool. Their names were Rick and Gina. They were enjoying their 5-year anniversary. It was one of those casual vacation acquaintances where you shared your hometown and talked about local eateries or beaches you had visited. We had a great time with plenty of sex. We returned to work all too quickly. Taylor had apparently lingered for a few days after the wedding to spend time with my folks. We were well into the hectic season at work, and it felt like I had to work twice as hard to make up for the days I had missed. We were undoubtedly in a growth phase for the family business. I believe there were various factors. The biggest one was the influx of individuals to Central Oregon due to the environment and lifestyle. I also believe that running a crew full-time benefited our reputation. There is no fake modesty. My team was creating high-quality projects. My mother also played a significant role. She drove us. She kept us organized. She negotiated the most favorable prices from our vendors. She put together our advertising campaign. She marketed the company. I enjoy the work. Except for one thing, I didn't enjoy the sales calls. Sometimes you get a terrific client like Carlton Eldridge, a real estate attorney from California. We had finished his project shortly before the wedding. I spent numerous evenings after work talking with Carlton. He was friendly and appreciative of the work we'd done. He promised me that if I ever needed legal help, he would assist me. But he appeared to be an exception to the rule. The majority appeared to be cranky and finicky. I lacked the patience to babysit the most picky clients. My mother, however, insisted on good handling of our paying customers. We had a successful year, and in January we dispersed profit-sharing checks. Mine was large, about $40,000. Brittany was ecstatic about the huge check. Let us acquire a new automobile. She said, "We're going on a trip. We had such a great time in Hawaii." "Let's go somewhere else," she said excitedly. When I told her I was intending to invest it, she became upset with my decision. I explained that I had always been unable to perform manual tasks. My body will break down. I'd witnessed how much my father had slowed down over the last few years. We needed to prepare for the future. She complained, "You're no fun," and I believe she was truly furious with me. As the new year began, business has remained solid with no signs of slowing. Brittany's website design firm continues to thrive. She was also good at what she accomplished, and the better website she created for us benefited our business and brand awareness. I wasn't pleased that Donovan was still a client. I would occasionally ask her if she had met or spoken with him. Brittany would give me a minimal response. I believe she knew I was jealous of Donovan and downplayed her connections with him, but I knew they were still in touch. She had done nothing to raise my suspicions about Donovan. Nonetheless, thinking about Donovan irritated me, and I avoided the issue whenever possible. Most of our time together was enjoyable. We had the occasional argument, usually over money, but otherwise we got along well. Brittany was renovating my house near downtown to make it our home. When I wasn't working, I was either helping my father finish his and my mother's house on the family land or working on the disaster that used to be Hilda's property. And then, in October of that year, I received an odd text message from my mother. "Company meeting at 9 a.m. Saturday." And that's all it said. What was the great mystery, I wondered. My mother and Brittany were close, so I asked her if she'd heard anything about the company meeting. She said she hadn't heard anything, but the way she said it made me suspect she could have. Saturday morning, I arrived to my parents' home. "Come inside," my father said, slightly formally. "Would you want a coffee?" he asked his father. I inquired, "What is going on?" "You're acting weirdly," I told him, and with that, he turned toward the kitchen. Just then, my mother and brother Taylor entered the living room. They all had broad grins on their faces. Taylor approached me and gave me a big embrace. "Bro," he spoke to me. Everyone acted strangely. I was perplexed. I thought about what I knew. My mother had called a company meeting. My father had greeted me awkwardly, and now Taylor was here. What was happening, I quickly found out. Timothy, my mother, began. "Our family business is flourishing, and it is more important than ever to be a family business," she continued. "We are delighted to welcome Taylor back, and he will be in charge of sales and marketing for designed outdoor areas beginning in the coming weeks." What? I believed my asshole brother, who was always too good for this profession, had returned. I was more than surprised. I got along better with Taylor while he was far away. Now he'll be residing in town and we'll be working together. My mother went on and on about Taylor's professionalism and how beneficial this will be to the business. She even remarked that I would no longer be accountable for sales calls, which wasn't so fantastic, and so on. Although I did not say it, I was pretty convinced things wouldn't turn out well. When I looked at my father, he offered me a fake smile before refusing to meet my eyes. This was plainly a power play between my mother and Taylor. I would have to think about all of this. The dynamics of our tiny business had recently transformed. When I went home, Brittany could tell I was upset. "So they've told you? Did she say you were aware?" I asked Timothy. "Last week, your mother mentioned that she had spoken with Taylor." Brittany remarked and immediately added, "But she sworn me to secrecy, so everyone except me knew about it." Great. I was really angrier now, but I had no idea what to do. After some deliberation, I decided to ignore the entire thing and go about my business as usual. It worked for a time. In early November, my mother organized another all-company meeting. I had limited touch with my mother and father in the weeks after Taylor's arrival at the company. When we spoke, my father appeared to be regretful for how things had turned out and was attempting to make amends by being extremely pleasant. My mother, on the other hand, was almost completely opposite in our family dynamics. Taylor and my mother were allies. My father remained impartial, and I felt as if I was being treated unfairly. With Taylor back in the mix, my mother's influence had grown significantly. I started being treated like a hired hand. The family meeting was more official. We sat at the family dining table. My mother sat securely at the head of the table. She ran the show beginning Monday and for the next few weeks. "Timothy, I want you to free up time to work with Taylor," she dictated. "Despite the fact that Taylor is intelligent and has some commercial experience, I want you to familiarize him with the type and scope of our current projects." When I asked about the projects I was currently working on, she told me that I was responsible for ensuring that my crew completed them on time. She proceeded to tell me what I should be doing, and it quickly became evident that it was my responsibility to ensure Taylor did his job appropriately. After the family gathering was finally done, I hurried to leave as quickly as possible. "Hello, dude," Taylor addressed me. "Thank Brittany for the lead on the apartment. I'm all settled in," he said. "Apartment?" I inquired, perplexed. "Yeah, didn't she tell you?" he asked. "Her ex is building several home units in Redmond. I moved in last week. They are quite great. I'll invite you over sometime," he added. I didn't respond. "I've just taken off." As I was leaving, I heard my father cry out my name. I ignored him. I was pissed. I'm upset over a variety of issues. First and foremost, according to my mother's description of my responsibilities in relation to Taylor, I would most likely be babysitting his work for months. Another thing Brittany did was assist Taylor rent a condo from Donovan. There was too much going on behind the scenes, and I was the last person to know. When I arrived home, I vented my rage and frustration on Brittany. I shouted at her for not informing me that she was assisting Taylor in finding housing. She understood the dynamics between my brother and me. She apologized, explaining that because I was under so much stress, she didn't want to upset me. She eventually sobbed, and I apologized, and we attempted to return to normalcy, but things remained somewhat wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, I started working with Taylor. Taylor had one thing going for him: his pleasant, easygoing nature. Many customers appreciate that. This came easy to Taylor. He had spent his entire life honing that innate talent. As we worked together, I observed another habit he exhibited. "Do you prefer to take shortcuts?" He was constantly looking for the simplest method to do something. He'd skip a step or miss something. I tried to emphasize to him the importance of minor details. He would nod in agreement, but I could see he was ignoring my comments. This flippant attitude upset me. A building site might be dangerous if proper safeguards are not taken. I tried talking to my father about it once. He admitted that could be an issue, but did nothing to correct Taylor. I eventually returned to full-time project management, while Taylor worked full-time in sales. Later that spring, I was on a job site when a brand-new red Ford F-150 drove up from Hop Taylor. "What do you think about my new wheels, bro?" he asked. He had a huge smile on his face. I merely looked, not saying anything. "Mom and I were discussing, and we wanted to make sure we provided the right impression during my sales calls," he explained. "We decided we needed a new truck," he told me. I looked over at my older pickup, which was battered and beat up. I simply shook my head. He went on to tell me that he had received a complaint from the homeowner regarding the current job I was working on. Taylor and I walked the job site, and he brought up the customer's complaint. I explained to Taylor why we had to construct this detail in the way we did. We needed to conform with the local building code, which is why we did it this way. Try to clean things up a little. He called me over his shoulder as he returned to the truck. The customer is dissatisfied, he added. I was troubled by a number of aspects of this contact. Obviously the truck, but probably more importantly, his passing on the client complaint to me. That was his job. Finally, his tone when he went reminded me of how he treated me as we grew up. He acted as if he were my boss. That truly bothered me. As the months passed, Taylor's presence dimmed my enthusiasm for my career and the family business. My mom was quite happy. Taylor was responsible for her successful business. When we receive a client complaint, the salesperson is supposed to work with the consumer to resolve it. Taylor would dump it on me, and it was now my responsibility to address whatever problem came up. My mood also harmed my connection with Brittany. She was inherently cheerful and perky. The negativity I radiated drained her, and we didn't appear to be enjoying each other as much as we once did. I tried to go deeper into the situation. The difficulties were deeply rooted. When I told Brittany about my issues with my brother, she listened, but I wasn't sure she understood. Tim, she added, I'm confident things will improve with Taylor. He was certain that he would learn on the job, she added. But Brittany, I'm not sure you grasp it. He can be a true, self-centered asshole. Timothy, she said, he's your brother. I think he is a lovely guy. Give him the chance. She told me, I don't think she got it. On the surface, this was how Taylor felt. He had the authority to order me around, assigning me the more challenging aspects of the business to repair. And my mother, who was truly in charge, supported it, but it went far deeper. My mother had always favored Taylor. He was the good son, and now I am demoted to second-class status in the firm, other than perhaps Roman. I knew I had done the finest job on our projects. However, my sluggish brother receives preferential treatment. I tried to break out of my pessimistic cycle by focusing more positive attention on Brittany, which seemed to help a little. I couldn't get the impression that she was moving away from me. I was leaving a project in Redmond on my way to acquire some concrete for a foundation when I noticed Brittany's shiny jet-black Outback drive past me, headed the opposite direction. I hadn't, but it appeared she was on the phone. I wondered what she was doing in Redmond, and then I started thinking about it. Donovan's building was close to where I had seen her residence. That night, over dinner, I asked her about her day. She hadn't mentioned anything special, normal stuff. When I asked if she had gone somewhere, she said that she had run a few errands. That is it. Brittany, after lunch, I noticed you driving along Ponderosa in Redmond. I told her that I honked. She sat for a minute without saying anything. Little wheels were whirling in her mind. Oh yes, she eventually spoke. I was at Fitness Plus in Redmond, she informed me. Why are you going to that one? Our usual one is significantly closer, I inquired. She hesitated and replied, the Redmond location is newer and has better equipment. I sat, thinking that the Fitness Plus in Redmond was close to Donovan's office. Should I say anything? Her excuse was plausible, but why didn't she mention it when I asked about her day? I chose to let it go. I doubted that anything awful had occurred, but I'd have to be cautious, especially with anything involving Donovan. I determined that my plan would be to be cheerful and pay considerably more attention to her. The next day at work, my mind wandered and I remembered how happy we had been on our honeymoon in Hawaii. That was it. I considered a second honeymoon in Hawaii. I was going to put everything up and then surprise her. That night, I went online and located a condo near Mount Alani on the Big Island. It was pricey, but it was pleasant. I started working on flights. I determined that before I went any further, I would chat to my mother about clearing my work calendar for that holiday period. The following day, I called her. I explained that Brittany and I were going on a vacation, but it was a surprise to her. So don't say anything. I provided her the dates we would be gone and requested her to schedule around my vacation. She said she would. Later that afternoon, my mother called me. Tim, she murmured with an unusually lovely tone in her voice. I have added your PTO personal time off to the agenda for your dates. Okay, thank you, I responded. Tim, if you wish, I can look into lodging and flights for you and Brittany, she said. I thought for a moment. I had planned to handle this myself, but my mother was extremely organized and skilled at this type of task. I told her that if she didn't mind, I'd appreciate it. I informed her about the location on Mount Alani that I was looking at. She said she would look into it and give her a few days. That was a relief. I thought it was quite good of my mother to help me out like way. A little out of character, but still rather nice. That evening, Brittany and I ate dinner at a little tavern in downtown. I had been working hard to be more positive, and it appeared that our relationship was improving. "I've got a surprise for you," I told Brittany. Brittany enjoyed stuff like that, a wrapped present, an unplanned dinner out, or any other tiny surprise. "Tell me about the surprise. Eyes are brilliant," she asked me. I then informed her about our trip to Hawaii. It's almost like a second honeymoon. I informed her that I had scheduled the time off and that my mother was assisting with the arrangements. When she joyfully asked me, clapping her hands, I told her we were leaving in about 5 weeks. This would allow her enough time to organize her itinerary. "I have to start a diet right now." She told me Brittany was always on some kind of diet. This time it sounded slightly more serious. We were both in a good mood when we walked home that night. My cheerful mood would not last long. The next day, my mother called me. She sounded thrilled. "I have located the ideal location for the excursion," she informed me. "There's a stunning view, easy beach access, and a private pool." She noted that your and Brittany's rooms will have access to the pool area. "What?" I asked. "You mentioned mine and Brittany's rooms. What is that intended to mean?" "This is a bit of a surprise to everyone, but it will be a family vacation," she told me. "The house has 3 bedrooms, and your father and I will use the smaller one. Taylor and Mia will get the rear bedroom. Then you and Brittany have the gorgeous bedroom. After all, this was your idea." She claimed Mia was Taylor's current girlfriend. "I met her once. Mom, I told you I didn't want a family trip. This was for Brittany and me. I told her not to worry." She chuckled. "You will have your privacy. It will be exactly like being alone. When you see the layout, you'll be overjoyed. I showed Brittany before contacting you. She's quite excited." She said, "I wanted a vacation away from my mother and brother, and now they are joining me." When I returned home from work that night, my mood immediately changed to black. Brittany, on the other hand, remained cheerful. All she could talk about was her trip. She told me about her new diet and exercise plan. She stated that she needed a new bikini and wanted to begin tanning to prepare for the tropical sun. I emphasized to her that I only wanted to go on a trip with her, not with my mother, father, brother, and his latest bimbo. Brittany commented on Taylor's date, saying, "I know she's a bit of an airhead." "Don't worry, we'll have plenty of alone time," she told me while smiling. She then gently began stripping. My attitude improved for the moment, but my controlling mother's actions had affected my perspective on this forthcoming trip. At that time, I experienced a minor mental shift. I began to consider the idea of a future beyond the family business. I hoped that in the weeks leading up to our trip to Hawaii, my relationship with Brittany would improve. So far, it hasn't. We were all working extra shifts to compensate for our time off, everyone except Taylor, who I had brief interactions with. He was as comfortable and easygoing as always. Taylor's routine consisted of long meals and short days. Once again, I noticed Brittany's car driving toward Redmond. One day, I figured she was going to Fitness Plus, but instead she claimed she was working out after work tonight. Brittany was intent on getting into bikini form. I began to see her physique gradually changing. She looked nice. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to appreciate my new body too often. She was usually too busy planning for Hawaii. In fact, I had the strong sensation that this trip was becoming less about Brittany and me and more about Brittany herself. "Tim," Brittany grabbed my arm. "We were boarding. Come on." She pulled me up and walked down the jetway to board. That tingle of unease persisted. I couldn't quite identify the source, but I felt something wasn't right. The flight was easy, and after the usual jostling around at the airport for luggage and a rental car, we arrived at our holiday house for the week. It was wonderful. Tropical landscaping, a gourmet kitchen, ocean views, and an azure infinity pool. I kept thinking, if only it were just Brittany and me. Even with these less-than-ideal circumstances, it was difficult to remain depressed in this beautiful tropical setting. Brittany's and my rooms were the loveliest, just like my mother had predicted. The French doors opened directly into the pool, and we were on the far wing, away from the others in the living spaces. We all fell into the various lounge chairs around the pool, exhausted from our travels. My mother made Mai Tais, and we all relaxed and enjoyed the tropical environment and gorgeous ocean views. After a few sips of the tropical cocktail, Brittany stood up. "I think I'll get my bathing suit on and cool off," she said. That sounded like a nice idea, but for the time being, I was pleased to sit and enjoy the environment. Brittany left a few minutes later. My eyes almost exploded out of my skull. She was wearing the most tiny swimming suit I'd ever seen. It was crimson, with very little material on her front and almost nothing covering her hips. Her top barely covered her, but that was it. She was almost completely ripped apart. Everyone simply gazed without saying anything. She gazed at us all, mindful of her appearance. "I know it's pretty skimpy," she said. "And I know I can't wear this to the beach, but we're all family, so I figured it'd be fine here." She spoke with a look of approbation. For a moment, no one responded. "You look great," Taylor spoke up. Brittany grinned at that. I was watching Taylor ogle his sister-in-law. I was bothered by his lustful stare. Again, I assumed that this was meant to be our second honeymoon, not a family holiday. Brittany's body was particularly noticeable. She had finally lost the last 10 or 15 pounds, and she looked fantastic. Taylor had obviously observed this as well. The next day, my mother decided to go to Costco in Kona. We could fill up on groceries and beverages for the week. She persuaded my father to travel and invited Taylor and me to join him. Now, I wasn't looking forward to driving 45 minutes each way to Costco, but if my father and Taylor were going, I suppose I should too. My father said he would warm up the car and we could meet outside the garage. When I arrived, it was only my dad and me. We took off. "Where is Taylor?" I asked. He mentioned he was not feeling good. My father replied. I considered that. Taylor was the epitome of avoiding responsibilities. There's no other way to describe it. He was simply lazy. I was wondering when someone other than myself will notice his actions in the family business. It was nearly noon when we returned. "Okay, good," my mother said. "I just came up to grab lunch with you," she explained. "Where is Brittany?" When I questioned, she claimed they were at the beach. "Oh," I said. "Is Taylor feeling any better?" My mother glanced at me as if she could tell how genuine my concern was. She paused. "I believe he was jet-lagged," she said. "Please carry this lunch down to the beach for everyone," she remarked, handing me the cooler. Taylor and Brittany were laying close together on towels. Brittany was wearing a bikini that was little less exposing but still fairly small. I laid the cooler down and positioned a slide between my asshole brother and my wife. "Move over, Taylor," I instructed him. "How do you feel?" I inquired with increasing worry. "I am doing better." "Thank you," Taylor said, unsure if I meant it or not. We spent the afternoon at the beach, relaxing and swimming. Brittany and I went for a walk and chatted. I was urgently trying to discover a pleasant vibe between us, but something seemed off. She was in a nice mood, but I knew Brittany well enough to realize it wasn't the best mood, and when you're in Hawaii, there's no reason not to be happy. The days in Hawaii slowly passed. Normally, in the morning, we would go sightseeing or to a new beach. The afternoons were spent relaxing on the beach or by the pool. We went to a few restaurants, but primarily stayed home at night and made use of the gourmet kitchen. Taylor, Brittany, and I were lounging by the pool the next day after a morning trip through the hot forest. We were drinking cold beer. Brittany announced that she was going to take a shower. She retreated inside, leaving her backpack, phone, and towel on the side table. "Tim, can you get me a beer?" Taylor asked. I should have ordered the lazy asshole to go buy one himself, but deep-seated familial instincts had conditioned me to comply. I walked inside to grab the beers. What I didn't see was Taylor playing with Brittany's iPhone on the side table. When I returned, Taylor had relocated his belongings to my chair, so I sat in Brittany's place. We sat like that for a few minutes before Brittany's phone began to vibrate, an incoming call due to habit. I grabbed it up and examined the screen. Scum. Sucker, I mumbled to myself as I saw who was calling. "Who is it?" Taylor innocently questioned me. I simply shook my head and he looked at me inquisitively. "Stupid, Donovan," I finally informed him. Taylor shook his head side to side, feeling disappointed. He then turned, cocked his head, and examined me. "What?" I inquired in answer to his unstated query. He hesitated, still watching, and responded, "I'm not sure why you allow that," Taylor added. I glanced back at him, not saying anything. "Tim, my brother Taylor told me you have a lovely, sexy wife that hangs out with that asshole. Not to add that they were married, and he must know all of her personal details." He paused and continued. "Taylor told me, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but in my opinion, that friendship is way too close." I sat and considered what he had said. He was completely correct. Everything he had stated. I have considered this several times before. The trouble was that every time I brought it up with Brittany, it resulted in a massive quarrel. How she gets to have her own buddies. Didn't I trust her? And ultimately, she conducts business with Donovan. She must communicate with him, etc. I needed to have a serious conversation with Brittany about Donovan, but if I did so now, it could spoil my remaining few days of vacation. I tried not to think about Donovan for the time being, but he was always in the back of my mind. The next day was our final full day at Mount Alani, and we wanted to make the most of it by spending as much time as possible on the beach. My mom filled the cooler with food and drinks, and we all prepared to stroll down to the beach. Just as we were about to leave, my phone rang. It was Albert. He spoke very quickly, and with his minor accent, it was difficult to comprehend. I got him to slow down. He said that our finicky customers, the Mackenzies, had complained about something Jimmy was doing. That's when Albert became involved. I knew this would take some time to unravel, so I gestured for everyone to go to the beach. I'd work out the problem and then join them. Albert told me everything he knew. Then I called the Mackenzies. I explained that the root of their concern was that he was following the local building code, and their deck had to be built in a specified way. Mrs. Mackenzie, the old witch, told me that their deck in California was not built that way. I tried to explain that building codes vary. They simply weren't getting it. "Okay, I finally said that we will return your money and disassemble the deck. We should leave your property by tomorrow afternoon," I told the Mackenzies with finality. Suddenly, they were backpedaling and telling me that everything was probably fine. The deck was great. They only had a few recommendations, and so on. I stopped for a moment before chatting with them. "Okay, we'll finish this project, but from now on, we'll do the building, and you may enjoy it when we're finished." "Are we in agreement?" I asked, and that was the end of it. 45 minutes later, I finally got to meet everyone at the beach. As I strolled, several various thoughts raced through my mind. First and foremost, Taylor was responsible for all communications with the client. My indolent, careless brother had once again shifted the burden of work on me. Donovan, or more specifically Brittany and Donovan, was another thought that refused to leave my mind. Even in Hawaii, something felt odd between Brittany and me. Then there were the unusual travels to Redmond with little explanation, which heightened my concerns. Of course, Donovan called yesterday. I assumed he was aware we were on vacation. It appeared inappropriate. These were my thoughts as I strolled across the soft white sand to our beachfront location. There were few people on the beach this early. My father was fast asleep on his towel, and my mother was engrossed in her reading. Brittany and Taylor were waist-deep in the bustle, a few feet apart and talking. I walked that route. There's one thing about tranquil water. It carries sound considerably more strongly than you may expect. As I approached my wife and Taylor, I overheard some of their chat. I can't discover any information about Donovan. Divorce me and then realize Taylor can't. Sure, there he is. I just stood at the ocean's edge trying to figure out what I had heard. It sounded like a private chat, and I was certain I heard Donovan's name spoken. Brittany waved and began strolling toward me on the beach. As she approached, I noticed what appeared to be a remorseful expression on her face. She was too pleasant and affectionate as we spread down our towels in our place. I softly asked her what she and Taylor had been discussing. She would not look me in the eyes if she responded. "Ah, nothing," she instantly responded. "We were just talking about how wonderful this trip has been and how we hope we didn't have to return home tomorrow." Now I realize I couldn't hear everything they were saying, but what I did hear had nothing to do with the trip or returning home. Brittany lied to me. That, together with the distance I'd noticed even before the trip, made me wonder what was happening. This trip was designed to reestablish our intimacy. The rest of the day and evening were uneventful, with the exception of one talk with my brother Taylor. I asked what you and Brittany were talking about in the ocean today. He paused and gazed at me for a long time. He finally took a deep breath and responded to me. "Nothing much, bro," he said. "She's one hell of a woman. I try to keep her away from Donovan," he explained. "Why? What exactly did she say?" I asked. My mother called for Taylor right then. He walked away and I was never able to continue the conversation with him. I suppose I was in a depression at the airport the next day. This trip had not accomplished the purpose of bringing Brittany and I closer together. I knew something was up with her, and I was very certain it had something to do with Donovan. Once we arrived home, I was going to put in extra effort to get us back on track. First things first. I was going to find out what she was doing, especially if it involved Donovan. No, I did not engage a private detective. And no, I did not use a friend's car and follow her. I just watched her. I called her more frequently, hoping to see what she was doing. I stopped by every now and again because she worked away from home. My house? All of this seemed proper. I don't believe this behavior came off as suspicious. There were still significant unexplained gaps in her days. I questioned her about several topics, even accusing her of wrongdoing. I learned nothing new. She may become irritated if I delve too far. One day, while leaving a job location, I noticed that one of my truck's tires was low. On the way home, I dropped it off at the tire shop. Albert accompanied me to the tire shop and gave me a ride home. I asked Brittany if she took me to the tire shop in the morning. The next morning, we got in her Outback and drove to the tire shop. She plugged her phone into the Subaru's USB port. One feature of Apple CarPlay is that it interprets your destination based on where you typically drive. It displays your most frequently visited destination on the screen and then provides an estimated arrival time. When she put in her phone, it immediately displayed the address of Donovan's building in Redmond. Yes, I am aware that there is a Modern Fitness Plus at the same area, as well as the remainder of Donovan's development and office. She noticed me take note of the address. I guess my Subaru believes I need a workout. She laughed with a nervous lilt in her voice. I pondered my alternatives at this point. I sensed something was off. I suspected it had something to do with Donovan. The phone call occurred in Hawaii. Taylor's statements from their previous relationship. You had to add in her unexplainable acts. I knew it was all circumstantial at this point, but I didn't often believe in coincidences. Nothing unusual or odd occurred over the next few weeks. And then one night, out of nowhere, she announced that she was flying to Vancouver to see her sister Claire, Claire's husband Mitchell, and their 3 children. My antenna was up. Brittany and Claire were never very close. Claire was 5 years older than Brittany and had settled down as a mother and housewife. Mitch was a nice enough guy, a fireman, just not like us. I also knew Brittany was not close to her nieces and nephews. Aside from the wedding, I suppose I had only seen them a few times. I asked Brittany about the vacation. Why did she go? What were they planning to do? What brought this on so suddenly? Her responses were vague, and I could sense a hint of fear in them. Still, nothing substantial supported my suspicions. Her goal was to leave Thursday evening and return on Sunday. The travel from Central Oregon to Vancouver, Washington, took around 3.5 hours. Brittany was really kind and attentive to me in the days leading up to the trip. She seemed to be in a good mood, delighted to see her sister. She called me around lunchtime on Friday, and everything seemed fine. She told me about her sister and her family, and I believed I heard her sister in the background at some point. Everything seemed normal. Friday evening at home, I couldn't find a specific ingredient for my dinner. A quick call to Brittany. It went directly to voicemail. I did not leave a message. I knew she'd see the call and call me back by 9:30 that night. No response. I tried calling her again, voicemail again. At this point, I was interested rather than concerned. The next day, I approached her mid-morning and again at noon. The same result. By mid-afternoon, I had decided to try her sister. Better still, I try. Mitch. Claire's husband responded instantly. Tim? He sounded little scared, which was understandable. I never phoned him. He assumed an emergency. What's happening? He promptly inquired. Mitch, I apologize for bothering you, but I have not been able to reach Brittany. I told him. He started. She came by yesterday when I was home, but she and Claire were not set to meet again, he noted. Do you mean? I asked. She is not staying with you, staying with us. No, I had no idea she was meant to. She informed us that she would be meeting some college pals in Portland. Mitch responded. I just did this information. Okay. I sensed something was off. Now the thread was beginning to unravel. Tim, are you still there? Mitch asked. Yeah, I am still here. Hello, Mitch. I must have been confused by her plans. You're correct. She did mention that she was staying with college pals. Sorry for bothering you. So I hung up. I sat there thinking, okay, she lied to me. She informed me that she was staying at Claire's. She tells Claire she is with college pals. I was fairly certain I knew which old college friend she was staying with. She would never have thought I'd contact Claire or Mitch. Right then, my phone rang. Brittany. Hello, honey, she greeted me. I missed your calls. Is everything okay? She asked. I knew I'd have to put on my finest acting performance. Yeah, I was only looking for teriyaki sauce. I finally found it. I spoke as neutrally as possible. How are Claire and Mitch? I asked. She went on to inform me that everything was okay. She told me about her nieces and nephews and chatted about usual things. So, are you sleeping on their sofa? I inquired, knowing their house was only 3 bedrooms. She informed me that she was, but it wasn't too bad. Okay. Any chance of a rational explanation was now gone. She lied to me. I hastily hung up the phone. I was depressed and angry all afternoon, knowing she was spending the night with Donovan somewhere. I took up the phone a few times, intending to contact her, but then I stopped. I needed to keep my emotions in check. I needed proof and a strategy. Throughout the day and evening, I was convinced that my marriage would fail. I grew sad and depressed on occasion, but fury overshadowed all other emotions. She came at home at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. I had to pretend everything was fine and appear calm. I did my best, but behind the surface was a burning wrath over her deception and possible infidelity. We had a regular evening. I was so restrained that she questioned whether everything was all right. I told her yes, and I used the standard preoccupied at work excuse to explain any strange behavior. She gave me a long look, as if she was assessing the truthfulness of my response. Fortunately, neither of us made any sexual approaches that night. She was probably too tired, and I didn't want Donovan's sloppy seconds. Brittany didn't get home until after 7 p.m. on Monday. When she came, she appeared out of breath and her hair was moist. Where were you? I asked. I was in the gym, she said, watching to see how I would respond to the response. Is your hair wet? I questioned. Oh, yes, she replied, reaching up automatically to feel the dampness in her hair. I showered at the gym, she stated again, seeing my reaction. I said, I thought you said you thought the showers were gross. I noted that she began explaining her gym and shower experience in greater detail. But I had had enough. I walked out the back door and through the fence to Hilda's old house to play about. I could hear Brittany calling after me. I ignored her. I worked on the property until dark. As I worked, I sensed a significant shift in our relationship. I knew she was lying to me, and I believed she was starting to guess that I knew about her falsehoods. Something would have to happen soon. I wasn't sure when it happened. 2 days later, I had been quietly trying to figure out what to do next. I knew Brittany was lying to me and was probably having an affair with her ex-husband, Donovan. I only needed proof. I was in a bad mood and thinking about my position. I was on edge. Anger is continuously seething beneath the surface. We were on a job outside of Redmond, and I needed to get some supplies from the lumber yard. As I waited at the light to turn left into Redmond, I observed what appeared to be Brittany's black Outback, moving away from Redmond and toward home. As she passed, I realized it was Brittany, and what upset me the most was the enormous cheerful smile on her face as she sped by me, completely unaware of my presence. If I hadn't been in the far left turn lane, I would have followed her home and confronted her. Instead, I made the turn and went straight to Donovan's office. My rage was boiling out, and I was fortunate not to receive a ticket. I skid into the parking lot in front of his building. I leapt out of my truck without closing the driver's side door. I bumped into the receptionist, who was terrified. "Where is he?" I asked. "Mr. Mims is now on a conference call." She stammered, stunned by my harsh demeanor. I walked by her and reached Donovan's office. She called after me, but I ignored her. Donovan looked up, surprised, as I threw open his door. He was on the phone, headset attached, listening to the person on the other end of the line. "Excuse me," he began. Tim, who did not recognize me at first, began when he realized it was me. I was pacing around his desk, tugging at his white shirt with rage. I knocked him back in his chair. I had a surprise advantage over him for a moment. We ended up wrestling on the floor, and while I got one nice shot to the face, Donovan's superior size and power eventually gave him the advantage. He wrapped me in a bear grip, pinning my arms. "What is the problem, man?" he asked me. We were both breathing heavily from the exertion. "Stay away from my wife," I snarled at him, still trying to get free. He paused, shoved me aside, and simply stared at me. He said, "Brittany," with a puzzled expression on his face. "Yeah, I know you've been seeing her," I asserted. "Look, Tim, I'm not sure what you've heard or think you saw, but I can't tell you anything other than she's working with Jan out front on the website." Donovan said, "The last time I saw Brittany." I examined him, and what he said rang true. He was not a talented enough actor to carry this off. He was not lying. I sat untidy on his office floor, feeling embarrassed and dumb. After a minute, I got up. "Sorry, Donovan," I said to him as I hurriedly exited his building. I left, embarrassed. On the way, I called Brittany. It went to voicemail. I left her a message that stopped short of accusing her of lying and cheating. I assured her that when I got home, we would have a long and honest chat about our marriage. If it wasn't Donovan, who was it, and what was she doing? The trouble was, she wasn't home when I arrived. Whatever was going on appeared to be coming to a head. She had been up to something that most certainly broke our marital vows. I was certain of it. Furthermore, I believe she was aware that I knew. And I believe that's why she wasn't home. She was unprepared for the confrontation. I tried calling her exactly twice and texting her once. I merely informed her that we needed to discuss. I received no response. The next day, I was less than effective on the job. It was a large project near Redmond. On this project, I collaborated with Roman and his team. I made a couple mistakes and anticipated Roman to respond harshly. Instead, he just looked at me, seemingly concerned. Finally, mid-afternoon, Roman approached me. "Go home," he told me, not in fury, but in Roman's idea of care. "You work out the problem. Come back with a clear head." He spoke to me. I paused for a while and realized he was correct. I was not doing any good here. As I turned, he offered me a kind pat on the shoulder. It seemed as if the Romans understood my anxious mindset. I felt a warmth from him that I had never had before. Despite my very pessimistic outlook, Roman's flash of compassion marginally brightened my terrible mood. Driving home, I almost expected Brittany to be present. I mentally rehearsed what I would say to her. I felt a mix of feelings, including rage and grief. I pondered whether there was any way to save our marriage. Was there an acceptable explanation for what had happened? I thought it was Donovan. I now realized it wasn't. When I got home, there was no sign of Brittany. I attempted to call. It went directly to voicemail. I sent a text. "Where are you now? We need to talk. Call me if you care about our marriage." If that didn't catch her attention, I don't know what would. I sat on my front porch and wondered what I had done wrong. Was she playing the same kind of dishonest game she did in college? Was it feasible to save the marriage? As these thoughts were swirling around in my head, I heard a car approaching. I was expecting Brittany. It wasn't her black Subaru, but a sleek white Audi vehicle. It came to a stop in front of my house, visible through the tinted windows. I could not see who was inside. To my amazement, Donovan stepped out. "Hello, guy," palms raised in a disarming gesture. No wrestling, no fighting. "Okay." He spoke to me with a half grin on his face. "Donovan?" I replied, astonished. "I apologize for yesterday, but what are you doing here now? How did you know where we lived?" I asked. He informed me, "You forget I helped you refinance this place." "I just looked up your file," Donovan stated as we came up to the door. I was perplexed by his coming and felt a little embarrassed about yesterday. I asked him if he wanted water, beer, or anything else. "No, man, but I have some information for you," he replied. "Okay." I spoke gently, curious about what he could say. "Don't shoot the messenger," he added, staring me in the eyes. "But after our little scuffle yesterday, I started thinking about Brittany, and I remembered seeing her about in the last month or two," Donovan explained. I stared at him as if to say, "Go ahead." And I remember her hanging out with a guy who lives in my building. I never gave it much thought because of who it was. I assumed everything was in order. But, given what you accused me of yesterday, that's when I thought you and I should talk. Donovan spoke to me. "Who is it?" I demanded. He gave me a long look, paused, and then explained. "Your brother?" he said. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Physically, I doubled over as 100 thoughts raced through my mind, all trying to figure out if there was an innocent explanation for what Donovan had told me. Finally, I spoke to Donovan. Did they look like they were? For a moment, I couldn't think of the appropriate word. "Affectionate?" I asked. He took a deep breath and told me, "I am not sure how affectionate they were, but I know this. I wouldn't want my lady hanging out with some guy like that without my knowledge," he told me. I sat on my front porch, stunned. On the one hand, I couldn't believe everything Donovan was saying. Taylor won't do that, would he? On the other hand, everything he said followed some sort of twisted logic. I remembered Brittany in her bikini in Hawaii and some of the glances he'd given her, but as self-centered as my brother was, I assumed he would at least have the decency not to pursue his own brother's wife. "It sounds like I underestimated what an asshole he could be," Donovan remarked to me, gently shaking his head. I guess things don't change. It took me a minute to process his words. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean with Brittany," he explained. I gazed at him, trying to understand what he was saying. He must have noticed my bewilderment. "She and I separated up over infidelity, he told me." "Yes," I answered, "but this time she did it, not me," I added. He stared at me, shaking his head from side to side. "No, you don't get it," Donovan replied. "It was Brittany who cheated on me. I loved her. I would never do that." Donovan told me. "She broke my heart." I assumed she told me Donovan had cheated on her. Or had she just stated that the reason they separated up was adultery, and I assumed it was Donovan. "What happened?" I asked. Donovan told me a story about Brittany and the general manager of the local BMW store. She was working on their website when she started working with the guy. He was married and had 2 children. He said he got suspicious. Too many unexplainable events have occurred. He said, "One night I followed them. I spotted her giving him a blowjob in the parking lot of Table Rock State Park. I felt like killing the guy. I didn't kill him, but I kicked his buttocks rather hard. I eventually got over my anger toward her. I never trusted her again." He informed me Donovan got up to leave and gave me a bro hug, telling me to let him know if I needed anything. That is why I drive. Audi can't take looking at BMW any longer, he told me while walking back to his car. Deep in meditation, I watched him drive away. My own brother, the more I thought about it, the angrier I became at both of them. Could something have happened in Hawaii? I pondered. They were obviously together enough without even realizing it. I grabbed my keys and began driving to Taylor's place in Redmond. I fumed because all those times she was supposed to be at Fitness Plus, she was most likely with Taylor. My phone rang on the way there. It was my mom. I ignored it. Several minutes later, it rang again. "Brittany," I promptly responded. "Where are you now?" I barked into the phone. "Tim, this is your mother." My mother replied. "I have Brittany's phone," she explained. "Where is Brittany?" I yelled into the phone. "She's here. She's in the house. She told me that we had an issue. We need to work out. You must come over so that we can figure everything out. My mother told me. We will work this out. This is between Brittany and me, as well as my a-hole brother." I yelled at my mom. "I understand you're unhappy, but Timothy, she said you didn't have to use that tone with me. We'll work this out. It's a family company. I'm confident we can." I hung up. I did not want to hear her. Bullshit. The phone rang again. My mother most likely tried to call me back. I ignored it. I turned around. Now I was on my way to my folks' place. What the hell was Brittany doing there? Once again, I was fortunate not to receive a ticket. Pulling up to my parents' house, which I had spent so much time working on, I saw Brittany's Outback and Taylor's shining red pickup. My rage was boiling as I approached the house. My mother opened the door and attempted to step between me, Brittany, and Taylor. Now, Timothy, my mother, began. "This is an unfortunate circumstance, but she assured me that we could work things out." I looked at Brittany. She refused to meet my gaze. "How long have you been fooling with this piece of shit?" I questioned her, nodding toward Taylor. "Hey!" Taylor raised an objection. My mother said, "I will not have that type of language in my house." "Shut up, Mama. You will not use profane language yet. You'll get these scum suckers." I gave her an angry look. "Did you screw him in Hawaii? Or did you give him a BJ at Table Rock Park like the BMW guy?" I spat at her, and Brittany collapsed in sobs. Taylor bent down to help her through her tears. She tried to apologize. My father approached and put his arm around my shoulder. I stood rigid now, son. My father remarked, "This is a messy situation, but I believe we can all get through it with time. You should take a step back right now, or you might not like me after I'm done." I spoke as he stepped away from me. "This is far more than just a mess. My own brother. Your son deceived me in the worst conceivable way. What about you and her?" I nodded at my mother, who was attempting to sweep it under the rug. I added, "Come on, Brittany, as your husband." I started, at least for now. "I believe I have the right to know the specifics." "How long have you been screwing this lazy piece of scum?" I asked. Brittany sat quietly on the floor, tears flowing down her cheeks. Taylor stood next to her and softly patted her shoulder. "Proprietary. And you?" I pointed to Taylor. "I knew you had low morals and a small conscience, but this is truly horrible. Screwing your own brother's wife is even worse for you," I spit out. "That looks to be quite low." "All right," my mother said. "Enough is enough. This will take some time. I believe Taylor and Brittany are both upset about what has happened, but as a family, we will get through it." I stared at the four of them, hate in my eyes. Neither Brittany nor Taylor would look me in the eyes. My mother remained cool, as if she had everything under control. Finally, my poor, lovely old father looked at me with profound grief on his face. "You have till noon tomorrow to remove your shit from my house," I told Brittany. She stopped and replied, "Tim, this is also my house." "That's not your house." I raised my voice. "I owned it long before we met. I've consulted with an attorney." I had not. "You have no right to my property," I told her as I stepped out the door of my parents' home. As I was leaving, I heard my father cry out my name. I ignored him, churning up gravel as I rushed away from my family's farm. The night was long. At the end of my marriage, I experienced times of intense sadness, but the emotion I felt the most was fury, certainly enraged at Brittany, my soon-to-be ex-wife, anger at my parents, especially my mother, for appearing to support my brother yet again. But Taylor sparked more rage. My sentiments regarding him quickly turned violent. I knew I needed to keep these feelings in check. I did not want to wind up in prison, out of habit. The next day, I desired the job site. What else was I expected to do? The workers gave me a wide space. Even grumpy Romans seemed to treat me with more empathy than usual. Apparently, intercompany rumor had spread, and everyone was aware of my troubled marriage. When I arrived that night, I discovered that Brittany had been at the house and the majority of her belongings had been removed. For some unknown reason, this made me sad. I wanted her to leave, but now that it was gone, the situation felt more permanent. I returned to the job site the following day. Mid-morning, Roman approached me, holding his cell phone. "Your mother needs to speak to you." I took the phone and listened. There was an issue with a project we had completed. The client asked an inquiry regarding something. My mother wanted me to go and check what the problem was. "You are the company's CEO, correct? You're unaware that resolving a client complaint is your salesman's responsibility." I told her that. "Get your lazy son out of your lap and send him to work for the client." I hung up. Several minutes later, Roman's phone called again. I noticed him glancing at me while he spoke to whoever was on the phone. Most likely, it is my mother. The next morning, Roman brought me the phone again with a different expression on his face. This time, it was Taylor. "Tim." "Hey," he said, as if everything was normal. "On the Lancaster work, a client inquired about how to treat the cedar. Apparently there was some." "Don't call me again," I said. "You are dead to me." I hung up. A half hour later, Roman approached me again with the phone. "It is tomorrow. Your mother. Do you talk to her?" he inquired, hand concealing the microphone. I shake my head. "No." I observed him move away from me and talk to my mother for a while. Later that day, Roman approached me. "Sit." He motioned me to an overturned plastic 5-gallon bucket where we sat. He told me I needed to walk away from this industry. "Too many family issues for you," Roman added. I sat and thought about it, and I realized he was correct. I couldn't function in the family business because I couldn't bring myself to communicate with the majority of my family. "I agree," I told Roman, "but I'm not sure what to do." He nodded and added, "I got an idea." He moved away, opened his phone and tapping in numbers. About an hour later, he returned. I have a nephew in Beaverton who runs a business. Roman described business like this, and he indicated with his arms to the project we were working on. He needs assistance. I tell him about you. Do you wish to work with him? Run, crew, he instructed me. We talked about the details. Roman also had a niece who was married with 2 young children. They were currently staying with him but were looking to rent a house. It sounded like mine would be ideal for them. I informed him they would have to care after Muffin, the cat I acquired from Hilda. He agreed. For a time, I gazed at Roman. I saw him differently now. I remembered him as a surly, volatile, difficult-to-like older man. I had a new perspective on him. I considered him a friend, the type of friend that will assist you when you need it the most. Later, I called Roman's nephew, Domikos, and we discussed the critical work. He essentially offered me the job on the spot. I told him I wanted to meet with him first and get the lay of the land. We arranged a time for this Friday. The prospect of a fresh start piqued my interest as I reflected on it. I met Domikos and his crew, and my decision was made. Was little older than me. His crews were joyful and young. They did a terrific job, were properly compensated, and were incredibly busy. His father, Drayson, had a little garage apartment available for rent at a reasonable price. Because I rented out my house to Roman's niece, I didn't have much to occupy the tight garage apartment. It was perfect. I only had one more thing to do, resigned from the family company. Even though I was legally a project manager for our family firm, I did a lot more. Taylor struggled to satisfy tough clients. I was called in for major tasks. I handled the design and takeoffs. When there was a personnel issue, I was often the one who resolved it. The family was going to miss everything. And I got a perverse pleasure in thinking about how difficult it would be for them once I was gone. Especially Taylor and my mother. I chose Sunday evening to inform my folks. I considered simply emailing them a letter of resignation, but I ultimately decided against it. For my father's sake, I would do it in person. At 4 p.m., I pulled up to the family house. It's Sunday afternoon. I noticed Taylor's truck parked at my parents' house. Uncharacteristically, I knocked on the front door. My father responded, "What are you doing?" Knocking. He spoke with a broad, enthusiastic grin on his face. "Timothy, put your arm around my shoulder." My mother greeted me with delight. "Okay, good. I am delighted you are here. Dinner will be ready in around 1 hour." My brother stuck his head out the kitchen door. I noticed Brittany standing timidly behind him. "Bro," he said, as if everything was okay between us. "Sorry, but I will not be staying for supper. I told them I had come here to offer you this," and I handed my mother a sheet of paper. "It is my resignation," I explained. "Now, Timothy," my mother began. Then she used all of her persuasion abilities to attempt to sway my thinking. My father mentioned how vital I was to the business, and Taylor even came out to try to appeal to me. "Look, dude, I'm terribly sorry about everything that happened with Brittany." He shrugged. "These things just happen occasionally. Do not speak to me or use that woman's name," and I pointed squarely at Brittany. "Hey," Taylor said and shoved my shoulder. "Don't speak to her that way." Even I had no idea how much rage I was holding in, but his shoving me triggered it. I turned on Taylor and smacked him square in the face. He collapsed. There will be no blood spatters. I'd probably broken it, for a time. Everything froze, and then my mother yelled at me. Brittany approached Taylor, and my father inquired why I had slapped my own brother. I ignored them all and left. The next day, I packed my truck and headed for Beaverton. It didn't take long for them to get into the flow of their operation. Most of those guys were from Eastern Europe. They were intelligent, swift, and skilled. I conducted less crew management and more hands-on building with these people. We completed some excellent tasks in a pleasant yet professional environment. On Fridays, the guys invited me to join them for a beer after work. On Saturday, many of the crew had side jobs, but Sunday was designated for football, specifically soccer. I had played a little soccer in high school and enjoyed it. They invited me to play for their club, and I was as good as I expected. These guys were significantly better. My rage toward Brittany and my family was always smoldering, but I didn't focus on it as much as I had previously. I had almost no touch with my family, except for the occasional email from my father. I didn't blame my father too much. I was aware that my mother oversaw our household affairs. My brother and mother were very different. My brother's betrayal was harsh and obvious. Taylor was always self-absorbed. just thinking about himself, and he went for his own brother's wife. My mother's admission of his transgression and hasty sweep of the sin under the rug was almost as bad as Brittany. She was a lot like Taylor. She decided what she wanted and went for it. Someday, maybe I'll be strong enough to figure out how and when their relationship began. I must admit, I was curious. All of these thoughts were never far from the surface, but with my newfound friends and co-workers, I focused on them less. Another new relationship I had was somewhat startling. I had gotten acquainted with Donovan. Every couple weeks he'd call and we'd speak about everything but Brittany. He visited Portland a few times. We'd gotten together for drinks, including one crazy night with the Eastern Europeans. Roman occasionally sent me a quick email, though he didn't say so. If I were to read between the lines, it sounded like my former family firm, which designed outdoor areas, was suffering some difficulties. Time passed, and weeks turned into months. And then I realized I had been gone for over a year. I was enjoying my time at Domino's, but I realized this lifestyle couldn't last forever. Something was about to give. My mother attempted to contact me when I was at work. I ignored it like I often did. Then she called again. I did not answer that call either. An hour or so later, Roman called Tim. He continued, "This is Frank, your papa. He suffered a heart attack. Your father has gone to heaven," Roman informed me. I sat on a pile of lumber and tried to comprehend the news. My poor, friendly father had died. Later, I learnt the specifics. He'd suffered a major myocardial infarction. He died instantly. He died on the job site before being transported to the hospital. The services were scheduled for this Sunday. I was upset, and a large part of me felt guilty for excluding him from my life over the previous months. I drove down on Saturday, and while I still wouldn't speak to my brother, I had prepared a temporary ceasefire with my mother. The service was held at my parents' home on the family property. As I drove up, the old homestead appeared to be in disrepair. It was surprising. My parents usually kept things up around the house and landscape. I hugged my mother but disregarded my brother's attempts at a hello. I saw that my brother did not have the same upbeat demeanor that I was used to. I also noticed that Brittany had regained all of her lost weight, and even a bit more. Partway through the reception, Roman grabbed my upper arm and directed me to a secluded nook. "Are you coming home now?" "This is not a question. A request." Roman. I said I wouldn't work with him again, and I nodded toward where my mother and brother were in the other room. No, start a new business," Roman said. He went on to explain that he could no longer work with Taylor. It sounded like there were too many client complaints and other issues. Roman wants to create his own business and wanted me to be part. I was interested. "Let's not get into this here." I spoke to him. "We will talk tomorrow morning." So we did. It took a few weeks to get everything set up, but we did it. It was difficult to say goodbye to Omos and the men, but everyone understood. Business began to grow after we established ourselves in the marketplace. We named the company Boucher Designs, primarily to honor my father's previous firm. Approximately half of the previous DOS workforce accompanied us to the new company, Boucher Designs. My mother left a furious voicemail, which I did not respond. She accused me of stealing her staff. I reconnected with subcontractors and suppliers I knew from my time at Doe's. Everyone appeared to like Roman in my new business. I heard a lot of bad feedback about the direction DOS was taking. Roman's niece was still at my house, so there must have been some unhappy customers. I rented an apartment in the Donovan building. This allowed me to spend more time with Donovan. I met his fiancée, Lisa. Lisa was a really attractive Madras girl with a dark complexion. She had an athletic, curvaceous figure. She appeared to be quite pleasant and loyal to Donovan, based on my observations. My isolation from my family grew more as I returned to Central Oregon. If it was even conceivable, the brief relationship I had with my mother would have ended now that I was their competitor. We began to hear nasty statements about us without a clear source. We know who said these things. The negative comments cost us several jobs. Then the comments became more personal. I began to hear chatter about how I couldn't retain my girlfriend and how content Brittany is now, the kind of rumor that reflected inadequate sexual abilities. One night, I went to a prominent downtown bar with a couple of buddies. We were calm and having a nice time. Taylor, Brittany, and a few other people were grouped together on the opposite side of the bar. "Hey, guy, I am going to take off," I told my friends, looking across the bar to see where Taylor and Brittany were. My strategy was to avoid them. I could only imagine a negative consequence from any form of confrontation. Tim Cody, one of my mates, urged, "Finish your beer. Don't let them run you off," he told me. I thought about it. He was correct. I will leave after I finish my drink. This was a mistake. They must have just noticed me. I heard the overly loud comments. I heard my name called. And then I heard laughter. I finished my last sip and was about to leave when Taylor, Brittany, and a couple of their a-hole buddies came over. "Hello, guy, clear out." I heard Cody tell Taylor, "I'm just here to say hello to my little brother." He emphasized the word little. "Hello, Timothy. Are you doing well?" He questioned me with false earnestness. He was aware that I disliked being referred to as Timmy. "Don't bother. Taylor," I said. Now. That's not an appropriate thing to say to a family member." He maintained his mocking tone. "Is it?" He then turned to face Brittany as if to ask her a question. "You know how sensitive he can be," Brittany added in a sing-song accent. "Take that, Brittany." I softly spoke to Brittany. "Hello, Taylor." Suddenly aggressive. He said to me, then shoved me in the shoulder. "What will poor little Timmy do now?" "Brittany mentioned that you don't seem to be able to keep your wife," she said, eliciting whoops of amusement from the group. I turned toward the woman I had once loved and married. I just saw a stranger. Was she always like this? Or had Taylor corrupted her? I wondered. "Screw you! You're miserable! 304! I yelled angrily at Brittany. I then received a crushing, hammer-like hit on the side of my skull. Then everything went black. I awoke a moment later, and through the haze, I noticed shuffling motion. As I attempted to sit up, my brother delivered one final kick to my stomach as he and his throng departed the street. Later, I learned from my pals what happened after I phoned Brittany 304. Taylor had cold-cocked me. My comrades came in to protect me, resulting in the 30-second barroom brawl. No one except me noticed Taylor's cheap shot kick as the fight came to an end. Any possibility of our family ever reuniting was eliminated. Taylor was my adversary. Brittany, too. I despised Taylor. No, it wasn't simply dislike. I truly despised him. He betrayed his sibling in the worst conceivable way. Furthermore, he demonstrated no signs of guilt or repentance. Yes, I despised him and wished him great harm. This anger would flare up from time to time, but I tried to keep it under control and concentrate on the positive aspects of our business. Our business proceeded, and despite the negative rumors, it grew based on what I heard and never asked. DOS was experiencing troubles. In fact, their shortcomings aided our development. Several weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Carlton Eldridge, the attorney for whom we had previously worked when I was with the family business. I'd spent a few after-work hours with Eldridge and enjoyed his company. "Tim," he mentioned, "I guess I wasn't aware you were no longer working with your family." "No. A few months ago, I ventured out on my own." I told him and he said, "I wish I had known that." I decided to do my own thing. I added that it seemed like the right decision at the time. "Well, as Carlton mentioned, I have a problem that I was hoping you could help me with." "Okay, I'll see if I can." I asked, "What's going on?" Carlton informed me that he had sold the house I had worked on and built a new, beautiful home on Timber Butte. I was familiar with this upscale residential neighborhood. The ones built on the ridge had panoramic western views of Mount Bachelor and the Three Sisters Mountains. We hired DOS to build our deck. The company did an excellent job for us last time. It's cantilevered over the ridge and will provide spectacular views of the Cascades, he said. "The problem is I'm beginning to believe this project is beyond their capabilities. I'm not even sure the structure is safe," he said. I envisioned the structure he described. We'd done big off-the-ground projects before, but they were always slow and steady. We all tied off for safety while working at this height. Roman and I were always present on site for this type of difficult construction. I had difficulty envisioning the current staff having the expertise to build something like this. "Carlton, what would you like me to do?" I said. He asked if I would come by, look over the work that had been done so far, and give my feedback. Normally, I would never criticize another contractor's work, but there were few ethical guidelines when dealing with my family at this point. "Sure," I replied when he told me Taylor was scheduled to come out on Thursday to discuss his concerns, and would I be able to come by on Wednesday? I agreed, pulling up to the spacious, modern new home. You couldn't fully appreciate the view until you entered the house. It was wonderful. Carlton greeted me warmly and appeared to be genuinely grateful for my assistance. Carlton said, "Here, let me show you what is going on." And we walked out onto the partially built deck. I immediately noticed that they were using an expensive high-end composite deck product and an aluminum stainless steel cable railing system. That part was nice, but the craftsmanship was subpar. There were several pieces of small blue tape on the deck and railing. They were markers to indicate problem areas that Carlton had identified. Carlton started across the deck to show me something, and I grabbed him. I told Carlton that this is not safe. In fact, your deck's entry door should be caution taped off. We both looked down. The deck was at least 30 feet above the ground. The view was breathtaking, but the deck, in its current state, was dangerous. From a distance, Carlton began to express his concerns. I took notes as he pointed out the different tape markers and asked various questions. I examined the job, and it appeared to be something Taylor was involved in. Sloppy, using shortcuts as if they were in a hurry. Just then, Carlton's phone exploded. "I apologize, Tim. This is New York. I have to take this," he told me. I nodded. Not a problem. I started studying the deck in detail. Several things about the construction aesthetic were incorrect, sloppy work. But I noticed the framing that had yet to be covered in deck boards. Wow, that was way off. I took out my tape and measured one joist, which was nearly 21 inches on center. The maximum size should be 16 inches, and for this job, it is most likely 12. I could see why he spaced it this way. He was once again cutting corners to save some time and money. Very poor craftsmanship. And then I observed one of the composite planks lying laterally over the 21-inch span. I want to move the board. If someone attempted to walk across that board, it would break. Unlike wood, the composite is not structural. That's why the on-center distance is narrower. I paused. I thought for a few minutes. I glanced back at the house. No sign of Carlton. I had a brief mental conflict with myself before recalling Taylor's cheap shot kick to the stomach in the bar. I made up my mind with a brief peek back at the house, and seeing no sign of Carlton, I moved. I took a small piece of blue tape. I shuffled out to the far end of the deck, careful to stay on the framing. I placed the blue tape far out on that edge. At that point, I carefully returned to firm ground. I then adjusted the composite board so that it was laying laterally across the two large gaps in the framing, pointing directly at the blue tape marker. I'd gotten trapped on the outer edge laterally. The board was longer than 30 inches. It would undoubtedly collapse if someone attempted to walk across that span. I glanced around at the unorganized mess on the deck. Nobody would ever notice how I had moved the board, and if I knew my brother, he'd be eager to sweep things under the rug on the job site. He would most certainly take a shortcut across the non-structural deck board, which would be disastrous. Waiting for Carlton, I questioned whether this was too severe. Should I relocate the board? I looked down at the rough ground 30 feet below. When Carlton returned, I considered moving it. Sorry for that. He apologized. "So what are your thoughts?" he asked. I told Carlton that there are definitely some issues here, but I believe they can be resolved. I would ask your contractor. I couldn't bring myself to utter his name in order to assess your issues and propose a solution. Carlton softly nodded and surveyed the partially constructed edifice. I posed 3 questions. First and foremost, please refrain from mentioning my presence. Second, if you do not receive suitable responses, my team will gladly resolve the issue for you. Finally, do not walk out on that deck in its current condition. I thanked him. Carlton nodded and shook my hand as I left. "If there is anything I can do for you legally or as a friend, please let me know, Tim," he said. On my way back to Redmond, I felt strangely uneasy. Did I really care if I had orchestrated the death of my own brother? Did I feel guilty after thorough consideration? I answered my own questions. Probably no, and not really were the responses I gave myself. But that evening I needed companionship. I did not want to be alone with my dismal thoughts. I was frightened to examine too thoroughly at my activities. I phoned Donovan. "Hello, Donovan," I asked a new friend. "What are you doing tonight?" "Tonight," he hesitantly responded. Lisa was coming over, and so were we. "Never mind," I interjected hastily. "You're busy." "I got it," I told him. "No," he actually started. "This might work out well. Lisa, I, and her younger sister Val are heading to Tacos for dinner. Let's meet there at 7 o'clock. See you then." Then he hung up. Lisa gave me a hearty hug when I met them that evening. Lisa was really different from Brittany. She did not have showy blonde hair or a tight shirt. Don't get me wrong, she was stunning. Just a different, more modest approach. She had the kind of beauty that grew on you the more you saw her, and she appeared to be quite attached to Donovan. "Hi, I'm Valeria." The little sister introduced herself to me, extending her hand and smiling broadly. Val has the same exotic appearance as Lisa. She was slightly shorter and more shapely than Lisa. They both had big, bright smiles. Just observing the sisters made you want to smile. We had a wonderful casual dinner with just the hint of a blind date about it. Lisa hugged me at the end of the evening while Val gave me a prim handshake. I hadn't been on a formal date since Brittany and I broke up. I wasn't sure if I was prepared for it, but I knew this. I enjoyed spending time with Val. Donovan called me the next day, Thursday, while I was working on the job site. "Donovan informed me that you made a great impression. What exactly are you talking about?" I smiled and responded, but I understood what he meant. Donovan went on to say that Val had liked me. She had asked Donovan a lot of questions about me, and she was startled to find that we had both been married to the same person. Val had recently had a rough breakup with her boyfriend of over a year. Apparently, it had not gone well. Donovan said, "I'm going to give you her number, but please treat her nicely, be honest. Don't lead her on, okay?" he said. I informed him that I understood. I claimed I wanted to get to know her more and promised to treat her respectfully. I spent the rest of the day thinking about Valeria. I didn't want to get ahead of myself, but things were looking excellent. That night, I called her to see if she wanted to go trekking on Saturday. She accepted. We had a lovely talk while we made arrangements for our hike. Taylor and Carlton Eldridge's deck were almost forgotten. Nearly. I wondered what might have happened. By Friday midday, I had not heard anything. Perhaps the small trap I had set didn't work. And then I wondered if I'd hear anything. I realized the last thing I could do was make an inquiry. If something horrible happened, I wanted to be far away from everyone. Spotlight. I picked up Val at her Madras condo and took her to the Painted Rocks Natural Area. This lovely panoramic area was 30 miles northeast of Redmond and far from cell coverage. We hiked for several hours, and Val kept up with me, barely out of breath until we reached the harder sections of the trail. I observed her roughness, which I appreciated. Thus far, so good. She checked many boxes for me. "It's fun to talk to you. Looks great." And now I see her toughness. I like that as well. We stopped and had a picnic lunch. It was almost 4 p.m. when we returned to the car and drove back to civilization. We suddenly had cell coverage, and my phone started blowing up, vibrating and chiming. I looked at my phone and noticed 3 missed calls, 2 from my mother and 1 from Roman. I also noticed I had received a text. Nervously, I began to hypothesize about the nature of these signals. I took another check at my phone. "You must have noticed my emotions." "Tim," she mentioned. "Would you like to stop and check your messages?" she asked. "No, it's fine," I replied, smiling at her. "Whatever it isn't worth getting into a wreck over." "Keep your eyes on the road," she said sweetly, but with a serious tone in her voice. "Yes, ma'am," I responded, and I noticed a faint smile spread over her face. As we approached civilization, I became increasingly concerned about the signals. I asked Val if she wanted to have a beer from the corner saloon, a cowboy bar along the highway. "Sure, let's come to a stop." She suggested that once we were inside and ordered, I needed to go outside and check my messages. She nodded neutrally. I was apprehensive when I listened to my mother's message. "Tim, your brother has been involved in an accident. We are in the hospital. Please arrive as soon as possible." I could sense the tension in her voice. I then phoned Roman. He confirmed that he had spoken with my mother and that Taylor had fallen on a job site and was in bad condition. We talked for a few more minutes, but Roman didn't have any more information. I texted my mother. "I will get there as soon as I can." I stood in that dusty parking lot and thought for a moment. I couldn't tell whether I was feeling bad or not. If anything, I was nervous. Certainly, I felt some regret for my potential role in Taylor's accident. When I reflected about how Taylor had treated me in my marriage, the remorse quickly faded. As I strolled back inside the saloon, I worried if anything could be traced back to me. When I returned, I observed a redneck cowboy sticking around in the booth, speaking with Val. "Excuse me," I mumbled as I slid into the booth, giving the cowboy a little but noticeable bump. Sorry, I said to Val, disregarding the still-present redneck. There has been a family emergency. That is what all those communications were about. I told Valerie, my pal. The cowboy addressed me. I was speaking with the lady here, and I don't think I care about your manners. He informed me with a slight harshness in his voice. There was still some long-bottled wrath inside me, deeper but still present. This shit-kicker was frightening me on my first date with a young woman with whom I was starting to feel a connection. I have to play this right, or I'd ruin any future relationships. I took a big breath, gave Val a glance, and then stood up. The guy was a couple inches taller than me and around 10 years older. Friend, I said purposefully, using his derogatory phrase. My girlfriend and I just stopped in for a drink. She isn't interested in you, and I certainly am not. Now we have two possibilities. We can go to the parking lot, and I'm confident I will beat the daylights out of you. Or you can return to whatever corral you came from, pal. I gave him my best scary gaze from my wrestling career. He glanced at me, and at one point I assumed he was going to challenge me. That was when I smiled at him. His eyebrows rose. His eyes shifted side to side. He turned and went away in silence. I sat back down and stared at Valerie. If you had battled that man, this would have been our final date, she told me. I was very certain it wouldn't come to that. I told her, but I don't want this to be our final date. I replied, Well, you better be on your best behavior, she remarked with a stern expression on her face. Message was received. We finished our drinks, and I told her I needed to get back to town. A family emergency. Val looked at me as if to inquire what was going on, but I remained silent. I hope it will happen soon. We will have a long conversation about my family, but it was way too soon to bring that baggage into our relationship at this point. Driving to the hospital, I thought about my mother, Taylor, and my ex-wife, Brittany. I felt little sympathy for my family, but I needed knowledge about Taylor's accident. That was my goal for the hospital visit, and then to lift my spirits. I relived Val's passionate kiss farewell, which made me grin. At the hospital, I finally found my mother and Brittany. I hugged my mother, but when Brittany approached me with her arms out for a hug, I raised my hand in a stop sign. What happened? I asked my mother. Taylor stated she was at a job site when she got into an accident. Then I got fragments of the story. She explained the Eldridge deck. I said nothing, just listened. Even though I was well aware of the situation, she stated that a board gave way. Taylor was able to temporarily hold a piece of structure before slipping and falling over 20 feet to the rough landscape. He dropped to his back. My mother informed me he's paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors say he'll never walk again. And at that sentence, my mother burst into tears. I hugged her with no sorrow or pity. Would you like to see him? She asked. No thanks, Mom, I told her. I have to go, I added her. My mother looked at me in bewilderment. Tim, this is Taylor, your brother. He's been gravely hurt. Aren't you concerned for him? She asked me. I recognized Taylor, the man who destroyed my marriage, and no, I'm not concerned, even if he died, I told her. I then turned away while Brittany sobbed. My mother reprimanded me for my lack of sympathy. It did not slow me down. One ramification I began to consider was the impact Taylor's accidents had on their business. I clearly understood the setup. Taylor would bid on assignments and oversee their workers. The remaining laborers would provide the labor. Taylor's injury may prevent him from contributing for several weeks, if not months. I was wondering what they were going to do over the following several weeks. Our request for bids has increased. It didn't take a genius to figure out that without Taylor, Doss couldn't bid on fresh jobs. Roman and I spoke and agreed not to hire any more of the present crew. That would be like kicking someone while they are down. A few weeks later, I got a message from my mother. She mentioned that she had a business idea for me. Out of sheer curiosity, I decided to meet with her. We met in a Starbucks. My mother, always the professional, was dressed and groomed for the board meeting. She had file folders and a laptop. She was completely professional. Tim, she started, I have a proposition for you. If we considered a combination, I believe it might add significant value to both of our businesses. In fact, I would be willing to sell a portion of DOS to you. Please allow me to review the numbers with you. She opened her file folders and gave me the data. She went on to highlight their top-line income and patterns over numerous years. I looked into it and discovered that Roman and my company's sales had been declining since the beginning. My mother recalls my dyslexia difficulty at school. I'm sure she assumed I'd be unable to understand this information. After a few minutes, I returned the data to her. "What exactly were your thoughts?" I asked. "Well, if you look at the worth of DOS based on historical sales data plus asset value," she goes on and on. I wasn't really listening. I wanted nothing to do with DOS or my family. Finally, she stopped speaking. "No thanks," I told her. She sputtered and questioned why. She then began to cut her selling price. When I refused to change my position, she began to insult me personally. "Do I need to spell it out for you?" she asked me aggressively. "Your brother would immediately grasp this. I can't believe you don't get it." Her ire was mounting. I stood up. "Your company has no worth," I quietly informed her. "Your market repute has declined. I strive as hard as I can to separate my name from DOS. I would not take over your company even if you offered it to me for free." I informed her, and I left business for us. It continued to grow, and we were booked out for over a year. When demand exceeds supply, prices rise, and we were able to increase our prices. We compensated our staff well, and Roman and I both made good money. In addition, we created several nice projects. 2 months later, I received an interesting letter from Pacific Trust Bank. I tried reading through it. It was quite puzzling for me. I believe most people would find it difficult. But with my reading disability, it was impossible. But I understood enough to know that was crucial. Suddenly, a thought occurred. The more I considered it, the better. I liked this idea. The next day, I called Carlton Eldridge and, though I didn't say it outright, asked him for the favor he had promised me. I delivered the hard copy document the next day. He called and asked that I meet him the next afternoon. He described the letter's purpose. Pacific Trust was the bank that my family utilized, and they served as the trust administrator for the family property. My grandfather, my father's father, who originally purchased the land, always wanted a family member to own it. The trust's provisions state that if the land goes up for sale, a family member, or a named party, has the right to buy it for 50% of its appraised value. As a result, the bank could only use 50% of its worth as collateral for loans. The current appraised value of the land and structures was $2.95 million. My mother had borrowed $1.5 million on behalf of DOS, the family business, and used the land as collateral. My mom no longer owned the bank-sized land. If no family members or unknown parties were ready to acquire the land for 50% of its value, it would be sold on the open market at full price. So Carlton explained to me that if you want to buy that land for half the price, you can, and it will be entirely yours. But I'd need to come up with $1.5 million, I explained. And he nodded. "All named parties. You, your mother, and your brother have the option of purchasing at the 50% lower appraised value." He told me that the bank needed an answer within 60 days. Tim Carlton said that if there is any possibility to obtain that amount of money, you should do so. I agreed, I told him. But I had more reasons than just profit, I thought. I thanked Carlton, and he offered his legal services pro gratis. My next call was to Donovan. We had a chat about my downtown house and the land I owned, which had been holding us up. I did some fast math, assume I could sell my house and land for $1 million. I had little about $200,000 in savings. I'd need to borrow $300,000 with the land as collateral. My mortgage would be less than what I pay for rent in my condo, and I would have the land. Donovan claimed he could receive a loan from me for the entire $1.5 million, even before I sold my house and held his lot. He indicated he could close the loan in 30 days for slightly under 3% interest. I contacted Carlton and we went to the bank armed with Donovan's loan documentation. I ended up signing what seemed to be over 100 forms. I did not read anything. I simply relied on Carlton to watch out for my interests. Carlton and I became friends during the course of this experience. I don't think I could have done it without his help. Donovan has also been involved throughout the process. I hadn't heard anything from any of my family. Good, I thought. I knew this would eventually change. I got ownership of the property on the 15th of the month, which is approximately 3 weeks away. I learned that the bank had contacted my mother, but they had no solid information about her future plans. The bank believed that because it was all inside the family, between my mother, brother, and me, we could work out the actual transfer of ownership amicably. They had no knowledge about our familial relationship. I texted my mom about 2 weeks before I was supposed to take ownership. I requested to meet with her. She agreed. I told her I would prefer to hold the meeting at her place. I wasn't sure whether she knew, but it will soon be my house. I hadn't seen any of them since my mother attempted to consolidate our businesses. Taylor and I hadn't seen each other for months before the disaster. As I approached, I spotted a shiny red pickup truck parked in front. I couldn't help it. I compared it to the beat-up pickup I was driving. I simply shook my head. "Nice to see you, Tim," my mom said. I gave her the briefest hug. I observed Taylor on a motorized wheelchair, trying hard to maintain his confident, arrogant demeanor. "It wasn't actually working, bro," he explained. I simply nodded back. I noticed Brittany in the kitchen. As I stepped in, she gave me a glance, but did not say anything. "So, is this a social call?" my mother inquired. "No, it is a business day." I said, "Oh," my mother said, astonished. "Go on." "On the 15th of this month, I shall acquire control of this land, the buildings, and, of course, this home. I informed them." There was a silent silence. "That is not possible." My mother finally spoke. "Your grandfather owns it through a trust. The bank takes care of it," she added. I then informed her about the letter from Pacific Trust outlining the details of the collateralized loan. I went on to explain that the family trust permitted a family member to purchase the land if it became available for sale for 50% of its appraised worth. "But we don't owe that much on this land," she argued. "I have not taken out a loan on the property in months." "How could this be?" she stated and looked around for an answer. Taylor became the center of attention all at once. "You did not borrow any money, did you?" she asked her favorite son. "I simply needed a new truck with handicap controls." He whined. "They become pricey with all of the accessories." My mother only shook her head. She confidently stated, "I will go down to the bank tomorrow and work this out." "Mom," I whispered quietly, "it's done. I have already signed all of the documents as of the 15th. This is mine." I stood quietly. Her eyes were filled with rage all at once. My mother turned toward me. "Get out!" She pointed at the door. "You betrayed our family and abandoned our business. Get out of my house!" I left, knowing I'd be back. A week later, my mother called me. The lenders appeared to have told her the truth about the issue. "Tim," my mother added gently, "I'm hoping you can give me a few days to figure out where I'm going to live." "Can you do this for me?" she asked. After a minute of silence, I whispered something to her. "Sure." She thanked me. I told her that I had an idea. I told her she could move into the small, run-down cottage on the property near the shop. "Are you serious?" she asked. "That dump isn't big enough for all three of us," she added. "Okay, just thought I'd offer," I told her. 2 hours later, she called again and said she'd accept my offer on the cottage. It just had 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a tight kitchen, and a small living area. I was unsure what the three of them would do, but that wasn't my concern. 2 weeks later, I moved into the main house, my parents' old home. I immediately began remodeling. I wanted to remove my family's negativity from my home. Over the winter, I refurbished the kitchen and 2 bathrooms. That spring, I had a friend in the swimming pool company who advertised as a pool. It sat out in the side yard, facing the grounds and the modest house where my family resided. Every time they walked out their door, they saw my large house on the hill with its swimming pool. That spring, I pulled onto the road leading up to my house. I observed Taylor seated in his wheelchair in the decrepit cottage's narrow side yard. I usually ignore him, but this time I paused, got out of the truck and approached him. "Taylor, I stated I was on a job site and was thinking about you today." He smiled up at me. Despite his handicap, he believed the world revolved around him. "Oh yes," he grinned at me. "Yeah, I was curious about your accident," I told him, wondering what had happened. He took a big breath and explained that there was a defective piece of decking that broke as I stepped on it, causing me to fall. He informed me that you were not attempting to walk out to a piece of blue tape and cross a large joist gap. "Were you in?" I asked. "Yeah, I was." "Hey, how do you know that?" he asked. I just tipped my head palms up in a how-should-I-know motion and turned to return to my truck. "You!" he yelled. "You set me up! I'm going to call the police! I will get you!" He cursed at me. I came to a halt, moved back, and squatted to meet his eye level. I told you that no matter what occurred, you couldn't prove anything. But know this, every time I'm at home or at the pool with my girlfriend, she's topless and we're having fun together. You were living in this dump with your mother and overweight girlfriend in a wheelchair with no feeling below your waist. I replied with a smile. Simply remember that. I spoke to him as I walked away. I suppose that concludes a long story. Val and I are still together, but it will be a while before I marry again. That's probably a whole other story in itself. Brittany did gain some weight. I never longer see her out back at the cottage. I assume she has moved out of the modest house on my property. She had never been particularly loyal, something I learnt far too late. Some people assumed that I let my mother and brother dwell on my land out of kindness of heart. That was not entirely true. I'm not a really pleasant man. Payback was the true motive. Throughout most of my life, I was compared favorably to my brother. He was usually better in school and more popular among the better athletes. My mother never let me forget that. When my mother held up a mirror to me, the silhouette of my more accomplished brother eclipsed my appearance. Now it's my time to point the mirror their way. The family business filed for bankruptcy. Taylor's luxury truck got repossessed. My ex-wife has left town. Taylor and my mother live alone. Sometimes I pass by their house. Every time I pass by, I honk twice. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired.